Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You forbade me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people failed. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
Hey guys, welcome to The Narrative, episode 58, titled this one, The War of Stories. I've done a couple double takes in the last few weeks because I've used titles for episodes of The Narrative that I was positive I had probably used not just once, but perhaps many times. And it turns out I have not used some titles of the things I say the most. And I figured with tonight's guest, although he is a returning guest, perfect guy to have this kind of conversation with. As you guys know, The Narrative is basically designed to go off the rails, usually from the beginning. That way, I have bicamerally both planned and unplanned every episode in history, but I do usually try to put an organizer together. And when I thought about both what I want to talk about and what my guest tends to talk about, the organizer just became a bunch of giant macro ideas, very few of which we'll probably end up talking about, but that's actually a good thing. It means I have confidence that we don't really need an organizer for this one. I'm going to be joined by Chris Paul in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take reality very seriously. The central narrative is very serious. Everybody's feelings will be taken into account. Unity will be respected, and the news will be our guiding point. No, obviously none of that's going to happen. Before I bring Chris on, I am going to thank a couple of sponsors tonight. The first one is actually ourselves at Soft Disclosure. Quick question, is your beard intentional, or is it just happening to your face? If it's dry, crunchy, or doing whatever it wants, that's not rugged, that's neglect. Soft Disclosure beard oil fixes that. A few drops softens the hair, conditions the skin underneath, and takes your beard from chaotic to dialed in. No grease, no overpowering fake scent, just clean ingredients that actually work. Now we've added the upgrade, our new boar bristle beard brush, engraved with the Soft Disclosure logo and proudly made in the USA. Real bristles, real control, distributes the oil evenly, trains the beard, and makes it look like you meant to grow it that way. And here's the move. When you grab a beard oil, you can add the brush for 25% off. Buy the brush by itself, full price. That's what that means. So, just keep that in mind. Do it right. Soft Disclosure beard oil and the boar bristle brush. Visit softdisclosure.com and level up your beard game. I did receive one of these brushes the other day. I have not yet applied oil to the brush and then to my beard. As you can see, I tamed the beard before I got the brush, which Ash was extremely upset about. But it will become unkempt again. So I'll have plenty of opportunities. I don't believe boars are harmed in the making of the brushes either. I assume they willingly relinquish at least some of their many bristles in order to make each of these brushes, but I don't know if that's true. I could be lying directly to your faces. We are also brought to you by our friends at Rumble, specifically the Rumble wallet. They can freeze your accounts, they can shut off your cards, they can lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether Gold, real gold, on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. It's not paper gold. It's not an IOU. It's real gold. Without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers, you can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer, outside the banking system. No permission, no middlemen, no cancel button. The wallet is yours forever. And I can confirm, first of all, thank you to Rumble and Rumble Wallet. And some of you guys have actually been using Rumble Wallet to donate to Badlands. So it does work. Can confirm that. Really interesting to see what Rumble is doing with Tether. Potentially some signal there. Okay. Without further ado, bringing on my guest, Chris Paul, who is going to tell us what we're going to talk about.
Wait, I am?
I mean, that's probably what will end up happening. But no, I've wanted to talk to you about many things, Chris, and we rarely get to talk like this. Just about narratives. Yeah, we usually derail our other show to have little snippets of these conversations. Yeah. But we're going to talk about the war stories. Obviously, we've been talking about this in various ways for quite a while. And I guess before we get into the beginning premise of this episode, which is a recent article you wrote, that I think will be a good leadoff point. The leadoff point to the leadoff point is, I don't know if we have sifted out people that just thought we were too crazy, and so then it seems like these ideas have taken hold more in the zeitgeist, or if they've actually taken hold more in the zeitgeist. And specifically, I mean the idea of narrative warfare, the war of stories, like the importance of narrative specifically. Do you think from the time that you kind of got into this stuff to now, that is less controversial and less like niche and weird to focus on narrative over actual.
Yeah, I think that I agree with your assessment that it has become a little easier to discuss things on that level. And certainly part of that is our audience and their familiarity with our approach in general. And to be able to approach subjects that way a little bit makes it easier to approach subjects that way a lot. And that makes it easier to approach subjects that way all the time. Now, the thing that we have to mention and always remember is that we are not the first people to come to this position to figure these things out. And, you know, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that we have figured out, and many people in the community as well, have figured out these things independently and have come to the same conclusions. But these conclusions were also reached by a great many people 50 years ago. And, you know, I think we talked about this a little the last time that I was on, but the postmodernists had many of the same observations about the kind of translucence of our reality. Like, it's not totally there as much as we think it is, right? Like, you can see maybe a little light shining through behind it. Like, you're like, wait, is there like a sheet that's covering something, like putting off a little filter? Is this like coming through in a little bit of different color than it actually exists? So we're not the first people to talk about these things. You know, I take inspiration from like Jean Baudrillard. I take inspiration from Joan Didion. They're on entirely different sides of the map, and I'm not talking about politics or anything. But Joan Didion was like, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And Jean Baudrillard was like, our reality is a facsimile of a symbol of something that no longer exists. And we are just operating in a realm of symbols and manipulating symbols. And so I think that various aspects of this have been observed a number of times by a number of people. And it is a matter of how popular these ideas become across a culture that dictates how easily we are able to discuss them in the context of a conversation. Because it's one thing for academics to be putting out papers, or philosophers like those postmodernists, nihilists and atheists, so, you know, they don't get all the way there. But the observations, I think, are very valid. But those are in philosophy books for philosophy students, dealt with by academics, and that's not bringing anything to popular culture. Even Joan Didion is a very famous author, a wonderful author, but not like read by the masses. So we have to bridge that gap. And I think that once people are able to understand that there is a story element in absolutely all of this, the fact that it reached us in the first place means that it has been turned into a narrative at some point and is not the event in its natural state. So maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and of course it has 600 different rabbit trails to potentially spin off from, which is both a good thing and a bad thing when it comes to trying to figure out which direction I want to go in. But man, there was a quote I thought of when you said that, that I cannot think of what the movie is. You just made me think, you know, when you mentioned the idea that we need stories, or we tell ourselves stories to live. There's a quote from another movie. It says, everyone has to believe they're good. Everyone has to believe in something. I'm sure that's been in multiple movies. I can't think of the movie, but that's kind of one of those refrains, you know, in storytelling that they often say. Really well written. Two refrains. One that many fiction writers have heard is, your story is only as good as its villain. And second, this is probably more ubiquitous in genre fiction, like sci-fi, fantasy, etc. Your story is only as good as its villain. And then the second would be, on that point, your villain should have a compelling reason to present themselves as not being a villain. If you have a villain who is presenting himself as being a villain, then you're dealing with a cartoon character, right? And actually, there was a recent quote I saw from Christoph Waltz, the actor from Inglourious Basterds. Is probably what he's most well known for, where he played Hans Landa. We've done that on Story Hour. So many people will know Quentin Tarantino film. He's the infamous Nazi. And there was an interview with him that I guess was somewhat controversial from a couple of years ago, where they asked him about this retrospective on how he played that character so well. specifically like how understated he was in some of these scenes. And they said, how do you play such an evil character? And Waltz apparently looked confused and said, well, he's not evil. And they were like, well, do tell. How was the Nazi Hans Landa not evil? And he said, well, he had a very logically consistent and morally consistent framework through which he observed the world. And I just acted in full accordance with that framework, which I thought, he's talking about acting and a villain and everything, but those are some of the more extreme examples of, on the macro, one of the things I say in writing, it's like the micro is the macro and the macro is the micro. And I think once you realize that, you can reverse engineer this fictional Nazi, the actor playing him, totally committing to the story that the fictional Nazi is telling himself. And it's sort of like there's no real difference between an actor doing that and people doing that writ large, except maybe actors are in on the joke and most people that are kind of moving through reality are not in on the joke. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I thought we were going to start talking about fictional Nazis, and there are a lot of fictional Nazis. And I guess that there were a lot of real Nazis, and there might be a lot of real fictional Nazis, and a lot of fictional real Nazis.
Right. And those are all distinct things.
Yeah, it all eventually gets muddled, and it's very hard to understand where it's all going. I saw that movie Nuremberg that came out a couple months ago. When I see something that is so blatantly propaganda, I'm like, I have got to see that right now. I want to know what the regime is trying to tell us about Nazis right now and about Nuremberg right now. And you go in, and I've already kind of come to terms with the idea that the Nuremberg trials were a limited hangout, that were kind of meant to absolve the guilt of whatever that entire thing was. They're going to give you a handful of scapegoats. You're going to put all your anger into these people. These are the pinnacles of evil in this world. All of the Nazis who have been now dispersed around the globe, don't worry about them. Hey, guys, we got them. They're right here in this international courtroom we just built. And Russell Crowe really sells it hard. For sure, he was the evil guy. And thank goodness that the global media, through the control they have over courts via narrative, was able to bring all of the Nazis to justice.
Well, something that's in the zeitgeist right now that we've been talking about a lot is the Epstein narrative. And it's kind of interesting to frame it the way you just did with the Nuremberg trials, because, and I'm like guilty or not guilty. I don't know if it's good or bad, but certainly one of the people who got really energized in what we call the truth movement, largely on the back of Pizzagate, the Q drops, and the Epstein files, which, in later years, I actually did way more digs on Q drops that were not related to any of those things, but that was a big doorway for me in, and like an energizing force. But I think that's why, I've tried to be part of this is reflecting on myself and my own motivations and genuinely asking the questions of like, okay, first of all, are we as a collective in the truth community that came into this stuff, those of us who came into this stuff through, I call it the darkest path, Epstein, Pizzagate, that whole idea, systemic crimes against children, total debauchery among elites, was like a big awakening thing for me. Were we right about that to the degree that we thought we were? And then two, whether or not we were, is it being weaponized against us? And I think, the starter of that is like, it's obviously being attempted to be weaponized against Trump, who's, obviously a symbol and a figure, but it's really made me think a lot in recent weeks. Is it being weaponized against us mentally, like against the people who actually really did engage with that stuff? I know that wasn't really your pathway into this stuff, which is maybe one of the reasons why you've always been a little bit more like sober-minded when looking at that whole narrative. But I wonder what you think of that in light of what you said about the Nuremberg trials, like that balancing act, I guess, because still in my core, there's a part of me that I'm like, I have this fear of going so far in the direction where I'm like, I think I'm being misled by these people about the Epstein narrative, so I'm going to toss it out. Because if I'm wrong in tossing it out, it's a really big thing to toss out as well.
Well, the thing is, when you're tossing things out, if they're not true, then they should be tossed out. And you can't know whether or not they are true. And so do you go forward with things you don't know to be true? Well, then we're talking about what is the claim that you are making on the basis of something you don't know to be true. And it turns out that, and I've been in around every kind of person. I grew up in a small town. I lived in New York City. I lived in Los Angeles. I lived in Austin. I went to a small college in a small city. I've lived in every kind of environment. I've been around all types of people. And I understand that evil is very real and evil does exist. And I spent almost 20 years of my adult life in Hollywood, and it is a different culture there. It's a transactional culture. And so people there do a lot of things that a right upstanding Christian would think, well, those aren't very Christian things to do. And they're certainly not, okay? Because it's not primarily Christians out there. And there are some people who identify themselves as Christian, but that's more part of their identity. And it's not so much a part of their lived everyday approach to life. And so there's a lot of people out there that engage in a transactional and materialist culture, and that is the entire focus of their lives. So they're going to end up doing a lot of things that a lot of other people don't think are good things. And part of them doing those things is believing that they have a relationship of consent with the other people they're doing those things with. And so it's not really possible in that paradigm for two people to sin by doing something with one another that they both agree to do, right? Like a sexual act, for instance, right? So they can both consent to doing something and they do that thing. And then that's it. It's just morally relativistic. They both agreed. This is what they've done. If people have hurt feelings afterwards, if they don't like how it turned out or whatever, that's just the price of doing business. Everything is transactional. An actress wants a part in a big film. A producer's got a part and can give it to this actress who he wants to sleep with. They sleep together. The woman gets the part. The producer gets what he wants out of that woman, and things keep going. That's a transactional culture, and all kinds of morality, all kinds of moral choices are made that way in that culture. There are things that a lot of people would never want to do. And so when you go, when you go about life with that approach, then it's about what your sins are, what your vices are, what your appetites are. And so then you try to find people who will match up with you on that level so that you can continue doing whatever you want. So down that path, if you go far enough down it, there are only bad things, right? There is definitely, unequivocally evil down that path. There is always evil down that path. It doesn't matter if you're in the biggest city with the greatest elites or you're in a small town and, you're just buying meth from someone who cooks it in San Bernardino, right? You don't have to be like in the suite at the top of the Chateau Marmont to be doing really evil things. And it's that moral state that we deal with. So all of that stuff that is down that darkest path, I have no doubt that stuff can occur, and has occurred and does occur all the time. And I think it probably occurs at industrial scale when you get into like trafficking and the bigger parts of that story. But in terms of specific claims people are making, you have to look at those and see whether or not those claims, if those people can't even substantiate those claims, like how are we supposed to take that seriously? And if we're making claims on that basis, how are we supposed to be taken seriously or even morally? Because I said this to John last night. It's so weird that we're like, yes, we are Christians. We are trying to create a good Christian culture around us by setting an example of proper Christian behavior. And oh yeah, those strangers on the internet are pedophiles. Like, what?
Right. Yeah, it's weird because I try to, one of the things I used to say a lot when I first started writing, and this was the net effects refrain. I want to get into some of that a little later too, just like ways we operate differently than how we operated when we first got into dissecting these things. And that's one that's kind of stayed the same for me. It doesn't mean that it works all the time, right? Because you can be biased in terms of what effects are you looking at or what effects are you able to observe. But it is a refrain that I try to return to a lot. So with the Epstein narrative, for example, I try to look at it as a narrative and then say, okay, this narrative is visiting actual effects onto the battle space. And by that, I mean the mindscape. Huge effects. Obviously, 10 years ago, it visited huge effects onto a portion of, people on the internet, including me. And now it's being dialed up way more. And, this definitely isn't like an InfoWar bubble thing. I often use like YouTube algorithms as a check on that and see what all of them are talking about. And yeah, they're all talking about this. So on the one hand, that I usually use those things as reverse indicators and say like, well, I need to check myself because that's not a good sign, typically. But then on the other end, I try to use the net effects refrain. And with the Epstein narrative, it's twisted me into a bit of a pretzel with the net effects refrain. Because I sit there and go, okay, if we are being misled by this op, what are the net effects of being misled here? And I can kind of argue it both ways and say, do I think it is a bad thing that many, many millions of people are getting to the stage where they believe that elite politicians and financiers and etc., powerful people are not the same thing as you and I. And on that way of looking at the narrative, I might argue that's a good effect. Like, is it better to run into a random person who's like, I think the elites are evil on like a foundational level? Is that good or bad? I might lean toward it's good. I might be wrong about that. But then on the other hand, I try to think of like when I wrote an article last week about it, I try to think like, what is the trap? If there is real debauchery going on in these circles, what is the trap? And where I'm at with that is this idea of, you used the term limited hangout earlier, is more like that, like less that this is all fabrication, top down, total fabrication, and more that it's this very convenient, very dramatic story trap that it's like, all right, everybody pile in here. We didn't really want to talk about this subject matter at all, but yep, you're right. You caught us. It's just some creeps over on that island. And, you kind of package everybody up. You get them really mad at this and you put it over here. And you're like, well, we've dealt with it, right? There's people stepping down. We've written many very serious headlines about it. Everybody's gotten very angry in loops about it many times over. We can keep doing that for a while. I'm speaking from the perspective of the system. They're okay with that. Like, yeah, get mad. Let the algorithms get you mad about it. We'll maybe even fire some people or some people step down with golden parachutes, etc. We get to say Orange Man bad somehow with this as well. And some of his friends who may or may not be good guys. So I guess that's used. You also use the term industrial scale. And that's one of the things I wrote last week that I've really been kind of hammering home and saying, okay, well, if we're not dismissing everything the administration is saying or that Trump's people are saying, part of why they might be pissed off, even if there's a there with the Epstein quote unquote hoax, would be that it is siphoning people away from the idea of industrial scale and into this much easier packaged belief system, I guess, of like, it's not the guy down the street that's involved with this stuff. It's those people on the island that have billions of dollars. And, maybe, I don't know, in some way it's like it's easier for people to conceptualize that because they can't conceptualize it on an industrial scale.
Yeah, there's certainly something to be said for the fact that a lot of what people think is going to eventually come out of this story is tales about celebrities and the depraved things they do. And again, there may well be some celebrities who do really, really terrible things. In fact, I know that there's a bunch of celebrities who do really terrible things. Terrible in the way that people are talking about in the Epstein files. Well, I have no experience of that, no knowledge of that. Do I think it's possible? Yes. Again, I absolutely think it's possible. because we're talking about people who essentially don't operate on any sort of objective morality. Everything is relative, and their goal as scientific materialists is to acquire as many things and have as many experiences and feel as good as they can in the limited time they are here on this planet. And so the acquisition of things and experiences and feelings is the entire purpose of life for them. So are they going to do bad things to get more of the thing that they want when they don't actually believe that there is anything bad they can do and no accountability to be had for the things that they can do? Yes, of course, they're going to do evil things, right? So there are absolutely evil people. But in terms of some of the claims, I mean, how the hell can you know? How the hell can anybody know? And then, you talk about the waking up of the masses through these sorts of operations. Is it better that a lot of people think that deplorable, like horrific, unspeakable evil could be perpetrated on children on a massive scale? It is good that people know that something like that is possible and that there are evil people in the world who are capable of carrying it out and capable of getting away with it. Sure, that is a good thing for people to know. But is it good for them to come to those conclusions based on a bunch of claims that neither they can prove nor can any of the people making the claims? And at the point where it becomes obvious that none of them can substantiate the things that they're saying, does that make people think, oh, wait, I was really sold on the idea that this sort of thing could happen, but all the people who said they knew it was happening, turns out they didn't actually know it was happening. So am I getting hoodwinked by these people now? Because I was down with it when I understood that I was getting hoodwinked by all these powerful people out there. But am I instead just getting hoodwinked by all these people who read the same things on the internet and believe all those same things on the internet the same way they believe things about every celebrity scandal? Like if, there are some of the influencers in the conning sphere who spend a week talking about the Grammy Awards, and then they spend a week talking about Bad Bunny and Kid Rock, and then they go right back to the Epstein files. And it's like, wait a second, are you just obsessed with celebrity gossip?
That's pretty much what it's become, which again, that's like a macro reverse indicator, those trends, who's talking about these things. And again, I guess I try to check myself both ways, because on one hand, it's like, okay, well, if some seismic thing was coming out, everybody would be incentivized, even all the worst people, to talk about it. But with this loop, it really does feel like a loop. I've been using that term a lot, where it's like, it's farming, right? You've called it attention farming. And it's like in the sphere you're talking about, it's very literal monetized attention farming. It's not just, hey, I want likes on Twitter. It is monetizable drama. And then just on like a logical level, something I've really had to reconcile with myself on these things, given how I used to feel about it, is it's even something, I think Pam Bondi was saying this, but either way, a lot of logical, well-versed in the legal system people have discussed the idea that, hey guys, if they're releasing all these files everywhere, guess what they're not prosecuting? Like anything that's in any of these files. So, and they've basically said as much, which I think there's another contradiction going on in the truth community where, when people are presented, when truthers, quote unquote, are presented with this kind of pushback and saying like, I don't think you're going to get the justice for this specific thing that you're all after, because they're releasing all these files. They say, oh, well, those ongoing investigations, and that's why there's still some redactions. Like, okay, that's possible. It's possible that there's all this stuff we haven't seen yet, but they wouldn't be releasing like anything that you're getting really angry about, or that is being farmed for attention, that is coming out of the files, is the stuff that people want justice for, which are the things that by definition are not going to be addressed in a legal setting. And, that's why, like, I wrote the honeypot hoax a couple weeks ago. And a big part of that was trying to say, like, okay, like you and John have been saying for a couple of years, what if we just took Donald Trump seriously when he's calling something a hoax? I do try to take it both ways, because he does speak in bicameral ways. But with this one, and think, okay, even if there was a there, I don't think Trump is going to wheel out this justice campaign after poisoning the campaign itself with allowing it to be farmed for drama in the public mind for years and years and years, which is why one of the ways I tried to sort of reach people that were in my former mindset with some of the writings over the last couple of weeks is to say, like, hey, even if you're right, you might be fucking up the thing you wanted to happen, which is another way of reading what Trump has been doing. Of like, yeah, guys, we were going to address a lot of this stuff, but you fucking poisoned it assisted rather in the poisoning of a lot of these operations, which again, that's even playing with the idea that it's real at all and not just totally narrative. But even if you play with the idea that there's a there, if they're talking about it on Fox News, we're not going to see somebody questioned about it in a courtroom, I don't think.
I feel like there were so many indicators over the last couple of years that there was going to be a major rug pull on this story in particular. Throughout the campaign, there were instances of Trump being asked questions about whether or not he would release the Epstein files after a decade of people not really talking about it. All of a sudden, it was the subject of some significant time on Fox News. Elon Musk was pushing a lot of attention toward it on Twitter. It's been almost a year. We're 2 weeks short of a year since the Epstein files incident at the White House with the binders and the Con Inc. influencers. I think that was a humiliation ritual. That's just me. There were Netflix documentaries about the Epstein stuff. That's never a good sign. Everybody out there in the truth community, every time something comes out on Netflix, they're like, this is propaganda meant to destroy our minds and destroy our children. And they still believe 100% that these Epstein docs on Netflix were just nailing it. We have the Wall Street Journal publishing the Donald Trump birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein with the boobs, and he writes his signature as if it's the woman's pubic hair, and we're all supposed to be very upset about the poem that he's written for Jeffrey Epstein. There's just another one of these things every couple of months. We got Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene wheeling these victims out before the microphones. Hey, victims, tell everybody how bad Donald Trump is. And MTG's just going out there this weekend. Donald Trump is the one preventing the Epstein files from being released. And so we're getting all that. I mean, Una Panuna's out there trying to get attention for these things while her face changes every 6 weeks. The whole thing is so ridiculous. And if it was any other issue that we were looking at and we saw all of these things, we'd be like, come on with this shit, right? But this thing, we can't say that because the issue, the underlying issue itself, in a generalizable sense, is the most serious possible issue, right? We can all agree that harming children is the worst thing, okay? And so underlying this issue is one of the most important issues that we can possibly deal with. Well, that doesn't just seep into the rest of it and make all the rest of it true just because it's so important. If it is true, if it's that important, if the subject matter is that important, shouldn't we be taking it more seriously rather than trying to win points on the internet or prove to our liberal friends and family members who are still somehow just around after 8 years that QAnon and Pizzagate were true? Really? That's what you're getting out of this? Is that the thing that you were saying 7 years ago wasn't crazy? Well, why are you still trying to prove that case? How crazy have you been since then that people need you to prove that you're not crazy? If your friends and family think you're crazy, maybe you're crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big point, and that's something that I even have thought about, I guess in a good way. I've been thinking lately about what does leveling up in what we're in mean? What does it look like? And I guess, on the one hand, you could say, well, if you could be utterly certain about all of your own ideas and knowing that you're correct about everything, that'd be the end state. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not going to, I guess there's a lot of people who are already there, right? Maybe that's another way to say it. There's a lot of people out there who are really, really, really certain in that they know everything. And when they're wrong about those things, they're absolutely certain that it was part of the plan for them to be wrong about it. And, you know, I've played these games myself, right? It's like the road to sobriety or whatever you want to say. It's like, you got to admit you have a problem. The first step is admitting you have a problem. But so what does leveling up in an awakening, in a search for truth mean? And I think you hit on something important there. And we've talked about this, you and I in particular, as former liberals, through the context of things like 9/11 and largely just that whole kind of zeitgeist that was created in the wake of 9/11, the sort of new era of jingoism and like get the people who aren't Americans and, you know, rage bait and all that kind of stuff. And I remember being hit with earnest but angry counters when I was young by conservatives saying like, hey, this shit's really serious. You know, a lot of Americans died in this operation, whatever it was, in 9/11. And a lot of people are dying in this forever war we got going on. So you should not be questioning the premise of this very serious thing, which I think it is interesting to look at the Epstein narrative and the crimes against children narrative as that kind of a cipher in the info war. Our counter to the idea that we shouldn't be looking into 9/11 to conservatives at that time. A lot of people forget this, who are MAGA conservatives, that they were the ones standing in the way of people questioning things like 9/11 and the war in the Middle East, was to say it is more important that we question these things because it's incredibly serious, the net effects of it. So yeah, maybe an InfoWar version of that and a leveling up is to be able to, you know, whatever conclusion you come to, is to just say like, hey, crimes against children is what drew me in to the InfoWar of thinking like there's something even bigger going on here rather than traditional conspiracy theories and the deep state, etc. There's something more Kabbalistic and evil and satanic at the root here. I do actually believe that. It just doesn't mean that, you know, again, if those people do exist and wanted to sort of skate by and get away with things, then all you got to do is dangle a nice, clean, neat narrative out in front of them and get everybody on that thing and forget about everything else. So I think, yeah, it's people in the truth community, I feel like, about this topic are more emotional than anything else, but they don't seem to recognize that they are being emotional about it, despite the fact that a lot of things they're saying publicly contradict each other on like an hourly basis.
Yeah, well, I think they're responding to a lot of the social incentives within the so-called truth community. You would think that in a community that calls itself the truth community and where people talk about truth all the time, people would be committed to the truth, and they're not. They're committed to the social incentives the same way they are at, you know, a workplace. If you're working with a bunch of Antifa at Starbucks, or you're working at, you know, like a place where they make, you know, a factory where they make cars or something, you know, where you would expect maybe people would have more labor-oriented work ethic, kind of Americana, maybe more conservative, whatever. People are just responding to social incentives in all of these different environments. And there is a social incentive and punishment structure set up on social media. In fact, it's probably the purest form of a social credit system. And again, we have these things in our workplaces or whatever, our friend groups, the moms of the kids at the youth soccer game, whatever environment you're in, there are social incentives within the group, and people are responding to those online, and they don't want to be called like all the names John's been called all week for just questioning if, hey, maybe all the people farming the Epstein emails and mining them for attention-worthy subject matter that they can post about, like Joe Biden's clone or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, hey, I'm down to listen to absolutely anybody's conspiracy theory about anything. And I think the world is a whole lot weirder than people are willing to admit. So I'm happy to hear that stuff. But the idea that all that is proven in these files, and then we should just be sending these things out as though we've like nailed it down with our research. You can see transparently that these people aren't doing that, and they have no idea what they're talking about. And so what this becomes then is a trending topic that everyone is participating in. Everyone acts in correspondence to the social structure, and that whole system becomes self-reinforcing. And you can see the struggle session generate and come together online. Somebody says something that is actually going to call into question the foundational assumptions under the rest of the claims. Like go out there and say, hey guys, isn't the whole pond a little bit too polluted to be pulling out any of these little fish and just eating them? Like, is that maybe a bad idea? Should we maybe take a step back from that? And because putting that forward negates the whole swath of claims, everybody who makes any of those claims is going to try to rid the conversation of that point of view immediately, because that destroys their whole conversation and it calls into question all of their integrity, all of their knowledge. And that, as we have seen over these last many years, is what makes people the angriest. And unfortunately, that means it's got to happen a whole lot more and should be happening all the time. And when you end up running into these conversations and these subjects that like nobody wants to question deeply, no one wants to examine their epistemology on, we are in real trouble. And that should go to every one of these topics, which is why I, at this point, try not to cling to any of these ideas too strongly. The goal is to have an approach that works no matter how many things you get wrong. Like if we think that Trump is a bad guy, our approach should still work. We should still be heading in the right path. We find out, oh, you know what? Trump's a bad guy. So we leave him over there and we keep going in the same direction. That's what we need to be aiming for. And so with that in mind, we can be very serious and very honest about what we know and don't know when it comes to these subjects. And if someone out there is not being honest about what they don't know, why are we listening to that person?
Absolutely. I love to, it's important. I think it's an important distinction you make of, for example, Biden clones in the Epstein files, right? Like technically there is mention of Biden clones in the Epstein files, but then step 2 equals what is an Epstein file? It's like just that step, besides the 8 other steps you should go down after that question. How many truthers are asking that or know the answer rather? If a normie asks a truther, what are the Epstein files? I would say that maybe like John or Jordan Sather or one of us might answer that somewhat honestly and say, well, they're a collection of files taken by the FBI and DOJ concerning Jeffrey Epstein. They are not, that is what the definition of an Epstein file is. These things are not created equal. Now, are any of the Epstein files indicative of provable, you know, like we can drag people in front of tribunals type of stuff? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But there are anonymous emails sent into the FBI about Joe Biden clones, which is why I think your distinction is important to say, we're not trying to address the underlying claims within any of the Epstein files. We're looking at the fact that they are all claims from various sources of various worths, subjective worths, none of which are verifiable. And then the biggest point is that when you look at the sort of battle space we're in, the InfoWar battle space, the thing that a lot of truthers are having trouble with or don't want to think about is that there is a direct incentive structure to pull out the fake stuff and talk about it, even by otherwise good people or people who are on your side. It is directly monetizable. The specific, this is one example among a billion over the last week, but the most viral tweet I saw that specific day was about the Biden clones. The last time I had looked at it, within a 24-hour period, it had over 3 million views on X, which again, whether or not you believe that the intention of the person posting those claims was earnest or not, the fact of the matter is, even if it was earnest and then they figured out they made a mistake by misrepresenting what they were posting, they are disincentivized on multiple levels to admit that they have made a mistake. One, because continuing to make the same kind of mistake will make them money. And two, admitting that they made a mistake like that demonstrates to everybody that they're an idiot, or at least that's what they think, right? You could just admit that you made a mistake, and that's what we try to do. And it turns out that people actually kind of like when you do that, and, you know, follow you more closely after that. But there's this, I think people have this condensed, we're operating in this like highly condensed, you talk about informational timelines. And I think that's one of the problems too. Like there's a real problem with truthers, and I mean ones who have audiences, where I think they've got an anxiety, besides whatever I think about them morally, there's an anxiety that they don't really have any ideas, and they don't really have an approach, which is what you were just talking about. You know, having some kind of consistent approach that can survive being really temporarily confused by something. And since they don't have a consistent approach, principles, or like a process through which that they apply consistently to everything, and that is evolving, like my part of why I like having these conversations is to try to figure out new ways to improve that process moving forward. People that don't have that, I think there's an anxiety where they're like, no, I have to know what is going on here. And even if you're being earnest, that's a really dangerous habit to set, where you're like, well, this something here has to be true. Actually, none of it has to be true. And you thinking that it has to be true, or that this person is not lying to you, is a really big vulnerability.
Well, yeah. In terms of like knowing things, a lot of people need to start admitting that they don't know things. there are like subjects that are still gatekept in the so-called truth community where no one knows the answer, and still certain positions are not allowed into the conversation. And that shit is bonkers as far as I'm concerned. I cannot believe that people are doing that. The fact that many of these people you're talking about, and you know, I'm not sure how much time these people are worth, to be honest, but they do take the position that they are specifically there to tell other people this is what we're all supposed to be saying, and they get that from authority. It's because they believe that there are people that they follow who tell them the things that they are supposed to be saying, and that it's like this very organized game of telephone where the important people tell it to a level of slightly less important people, and then those people tell it to the influencer class, and then the influencer class has to distribute the same thing through these different iterations to all the normies out there. And sooner or later, they're going to have the right things to tell the normies so that the normies will finally wake up. That whole thing is bullshit. And it's crazy because you could ask truthers, hey, where does truth come from? Like, what's the definition of truth? And most of them will have no idea. And they will think that it is just a series of contingent facts that are represented in the world. Like if there are 5 oranges there and I say, I can see 5 oranges, well, then that's the truth. Okay, well, you are telling the truth about what you can see. That's cool. Are there 5 oranges there? Yes. In terms of your perception, we can get into other conversations where some of the kind of metaphysical orientation of that might shift if we wanted to go to those places. But generally, contingent facts about the world are not what we're talking about when we're talking about discovering truth about the world. And when it comes to truth about subjects like the one at the center of our discussion right now, well, it's very, very difficult to get to that sort of truth. And that sort of truth might be inaccessible. We can know about that truth at large, and that terrible things like that can happen, which means that they probably do happen because of the presence of evil in the world and because of the incentives that come along with being willing to commit evil on behalf of powerful people. So does that stuff happen? It's almost necessarily true that it does happen, but we're not going to discover it from looking at a bunch of emails, decontextualized, and then thinking, oh, these are the places where truth comes from. There are so many problems with this story. There are bigger problems with the approach to this story. And the fact that we have seen these same epistemological problems at every single level of this movement for the last however many years we've been involved in it means that it cannot be taken seriously at this point when there is actual important subject matter to discuss. People who are telling people in the truth community that it was necessary for them to go out and vote in our fake elections, even though nothing can stop what is coming. Well, those people can't be taken seriously. And I don't know why people keep taking them seriously. I don't listen to these people at all. They might know contingent facts about the world, but what are they going to tell me? Like, and I'm not trying to be like, I have the solution to this. It's like, I would never believe someone's secondhand opinions on stuff that I can see they clearly don't know. Why would I do that? Okay, it doesn't make any sense. And have they spent more time on these subjects than other people have? Yes. But if they're telling me that they know what's in the Epstein files, no, they don't. Like, how can anybody get that wrong? And why would anybody tolerate other people getting it wrong and still listen to those people? I just don't get what anyone is doing listening to Twitter about any of these subjects. Twitter might be the most retarded place on earth. Maybe Blue Sky is more retarded, but that's only because that's like a more mentally ill version of Twitter.
Right. Yeah. Same social incentives, to your point too, it made me think, and I don't think this is always immoral or intentional, but there's this strange self-reflection I think a lot of truthers have to go through, specifically regarding the Epstein narrative. I think is an easy one to apply it to. Obviously, it's timely, but again, it's very emotional. Kind of the revelation that a lot of people want it to be true. And when I say that, I don't mean that they want these things to have happened. Of course, there's some freaks out there, but by and large, I think most people that got energized by that whole narrative in the Q drops, etc., they're operating in good faith. They're operating from a moral foundation and a moral framework, which is the irony. That's why they become so emotionally attached to specific theories. It's certainly one of the reasons I became very emotionally attached to the crimes against children narrative, is because I wanted that to stop if it was true. But the other side of that coin, this has no bearing on whether or not something is true. I'm just saying that I think if people really dig into the deep matter of why they are so emotionally engaged with a specific narrative like this, I think there's an element of wanting it to be true because it means that it's not even so selfish that, oh, you figured it out. I think it makes things cleaner and easier, right? And it's almost like, I think there's a human element that you talk about a lot in terms of reality and people's, the beliefs people form about reality, that they feel the need to form about reality. The same thing is true with these stories that inform it. If they know this to be true, and they knew this to be true 10 years ago, and they feel comfortable in knowing that this was the truth the whole time, there's like a comfort in that. There's a stability of, oh, figured this thing out. I spent all this time listening to the correct people about this highly emotional subject. I really wanted to be able to amplify this subject to other people who were not listening to me before. So for all those reasons, you're emotionally incentivized to believe that it's true no matter what, which I think is I just don't think it's something a lot of truth community people think about. They think, no, I want the truth. And to your point, it's like, well, is that really what you want? Because it sounds like if somebody even suggests, like somebody like Donald Trump even suggests that what you are parroting about this narrative is not indicative of the truth, you don't like that. So you either emotionally reject that of what Trump says, or you get to play the gymnastics game where, because you don't want that to be the thing Trump means, in this case, he is using 5D chess, but in another truth, where he is saying something you do like, he is not using 5D chess in that example. So you get to pick and choose depending on what you want to be the truth.
Yeah, I also maybe we should move on after this, but I think that it's very strange to talk about all of this being a movie and everything being under full control, but yet also think that there are perpetrators of these horrific crimes as part of that equation. And if they're not real perpetrators, then what are we doing? If they're not real perpetrators and we're still getting these stories and wanting to punish other humans, see them imprisoned, see them executed, whatever that might be, like at some point, don't we have to decide whether these stories are real or not? And if you're only able to get halfway there, like what are we doing wishing death on people?
Right.
The thing I want to know how to, I want to say this the right way. Some of this stuff ends up becoming circular and self-defeating. Like the principles at some point cannot, they're not compatible with one another. The worldviews are not consistent and sound. And I don't know why it seems like a lot of people end up chasing their tails on this stuff because you can't keep those things straight. I think that the best thing we can do is say when we don't know stuff, ask lots of questions and be very clear that, these are opinions. I think that there's a range of possibilities. I weigh these with various probabilities, and that's the best I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is all a good lead up in terms of I really want to talk about a lot of your approach to this stuff. We've said this in various conversations in various ways, but one of the things that we're sometimes challenged with, especially through the lens of narrative warfare, is basically the idea of like, well, if you're not anchoring yourself to something, how are you able to operate at all, or what's the point of operating at all? And I think you do anchor yourself to very firm things. Some would say much firmer things than having to believe a specific narrative. So I want to get into that through the lens of your recent writing. I do want to take a break to thank our other sponsors real quick. And that starts with ourselves again at the Badlands shop. If you checked out the Badlands shop lately, you might be surprised by what you've been missing. Find new everyday essentials perfect for the whole family. From clean lotions to natural remedies and so much more, there's something for everyone. It's more than just shopping. You're strengthening the Badlands community. Every purchase you make directly fuels Badlands Media and its values. You're empowering family businesses and fellow Badlanders and helping creators who share your core values thrive. Thank you for supporting the businesses that support Badlands Media. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/shop or click the shop button in the main menu. Bunch of options there. And thank you to ourselves for sponsoring ourselves. And we are also brought to you by our friends at The Kids Guide. The Kids Guide brought to us by Rumble. All right, parents, real talk for a second. America is about to hit a huge milestone. We're coming up on America's 250th birthday. 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-government the world has ever seen. This is the perfect moment to help your kids understand why this country matters, not just fireworks and hot dogs, but the story behind it all. There's a free guide called The Kids Guide to America's 250th Birthday. It's a great way to introduce kids to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why the ideas they fought for still matter today. The guide sends kids back to the moment when brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing full well they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks it all down in the way kids can actually understand and enjoy without watering it down or turning it into boring schoolwork. If you care about raising kids who know where this country came from and why it's worth preserving, this is something you'll want to grab. You just need to pay. It's completely free with a special offer. You just need to pay $2 for shipping. Head to freeusabirthday.com. That's freeusabirthday.com. The Kids Guide to America's 250th Birthday for your kids. America's story matters. Make sure the next generation knows it. Thank you to The Kids Guide for that, which is pretty timely. 250th is a story. Trump is really interested in us knowing that story, or at least thinking about that story a lot this year, which I think is signal. But I think we set ourselves up well with the Epstein thing as an example of a current narrative. Why I really wanted to have Chris here today is he recently came out with a great article, Chicken Egg Chicken. I'm your moderator.substack.com. If anybody watching this has not subscribed, do so. But this is well named. I'm always trying to think too hard.
Do you like the subtitle?
Chicken Egg. I originally thought that was the main title you were using, and I was going to be like, I like Chicken Egg Chicken better, man. I think you should stick with that one, but I didn't even notice that you went bicameral with it. But the first line here, I think, question in the answer, what comes first, the event itself or the story about the event that occurred? I think this is very relevant to everything we're talking about with Epstein, but probably even more so with a lot of other narratives. But why did you feel like writing this now? And I don't know, just go wherever you want with it. Why is that to me, I think this is a central premise, a central foundational premise or framework. And I do mean foundational. So I think it's important to get across to people that, like, this is not looping mental masturbation in my mind or thinking about stuff for the sake of thinking about stuff. I consider this kind of premise that you're laying out absolutely vital to what we all say we're doing in the info war. So I wonder why you feel that way.
Good, thanks. So I guess first thing is, guys, if you want to read this, I'm your moderator.substack.com. I think it's going free to everyone tomorrow early in the morning, but if it's still got a paywall up right now, it'll be gone mid-morning tomorrow for sure. So I wrote this after seeing the Alex Preddy thing in Minnesota. And every time there's an event like that, trauma event, whatever kind of event it is, school shooting, one of these assassination events, the Irina Zarutskaya thing, all of these events, immediately all of Twitter wants to figure out every last minute detail so that a political point can be proven, a political movement can be started, a political goal can be advanced, and people only look at these events as though they are events. Okay. And so what I'm talking about in this article in particular, the example that I use is, we have this president who comes into office or was already in office as a result of a fake election. One of the key issues that established his public mandate, assuming any legitimacy at all, it is on the public mandate. A lot of what was behind that was a widespread agreement that immigration is our problem, that the illegal alien issue is a major problem, and that deportations are one of the solutions to that problem. It is something that must happen just to be a society of law and order. We have allowed all these people in here illegally. They are depressing wages. They are committing crimes and the rest of it. And so they must be moved out. So Donald Trump has a mandate to go ahead and do deportations. Now, if you are the global regime, the uniparty, as representative of that regime in America, you have spent decades bringing all of those illegal aliens in. So you don't want them moved out, even if you are the Republicans saying that you are aligned with Trump. Well, how do you do that? Reversing a public mandate is a public relations issue. That is a task for public relations people, for campaign people, for advertisers, for marketers. That is a narrative issue. That is where you are fighting that battle. So how are you going to take away Trump's mandate for deportations? Well, you can contest it in the courts, but he doesn't have he's not doing something illegal or unconstitutional. He's doing his duty as he sees it as commander-in-chief of the military and the executive who is in charge of the law enforcement in this country. He's the chief law enforcement officer, as well as the chief magistrate and the chief commander-in-chief of the military. So it's his job to do that. So they're not going to get him in the courts, but what they can do with the courts is get a decision from a district court judge, some federal judge somewhere that says Donald Trump is violating the Constitution, which means they have 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months before it goes through the appeals courts and is then reversed, where the media gets to write over and over again, Trump decision overturned, Trump decision overturned. And they make the entire country believe that what Trump is doing is illegal. Then they want to tug at people's heartstrings. And so they show the little kid in his cute little bunny hat with his little backpack. And it's like, that little kid's dad is getting deported. Don't you feel bad? Look at what we're doing to families. We're ripping families apart through these deportations. And so they'll just keep lumping these things on. They'll do like these little character pieces about illegal aliens who've been here for 5 years or 10 years, and they're facing deportation. Anything to make us think, oh, we're getting rid of the good people with the bad. And so then we get into these kind of more ground-based operations where DHS goes in for a surge in Minneapolis. Then a protest movement comes out. The protesters and the city where they're protesting, where the police are a function of the mayor, who's a function of the governor or whatever else. But all of this is part of the same system. And so the police square off a few blocks. The protesters come into those blocks. Confrontations are staged and filmed. Those are sent out on social media. Everybody forms their opinions. Something terrible happens. And we just keep seeing these events escalate. And over time, they culminate in the shooting of Alex Preddy, something that was clearly instigated. It looks staged. The officers don't look like they're doing a great job. The protesters look like they're being retarded. He's definitely got a gun. And so all this looks very natural. And then 5 days later, they have a vote on whether or not DHS is going to be defunded. And it's like, well, look at this. You can see the orchestration behind these events. You can see that every one of the events that happens has a two-sided, at least, coordinated messaging op that launches right away. And at what point do you see that the orchestration is driving events rather than the other way around? And if the orchestration is driving the events, then the minute details of the events actually don't matter except as functions of the orchestration, right? So at that point, you have to focus on the orchestration. And that is the sort of thing that you and I talk about all the time. Like, it really is just a story-only approach. Everything else is a function of that story. And we know that this is how propaganda operates because Edward Bernays wrote a guidebook on how it operates 100 years ago that we can see perfectly still in play.
I even think that point you ended on is understated in the quote unquote info war in the truth community. A lot of people have heard of that. They've heard of Edward Bernays. They've heard of propaganda, but you just said it's a guidebook. And I genuinely think that a lot of people who call themselves truthers are not aware that it was not a book describing a thesis, which is still useful. Those are still useful books. It was a book proposing it was a manual. It was a guide. So, and I think that's understated because it implies that governments and people have been using the guide, and the guide lays that out, right? The most powerful propagandists in the world use propaganda for a reason. And the first note I wrote down about the chicken, egg, chicken discussion was the first mistake people make is on the central premise. And even that note could be misconstrued, maybe. You might think that means, I think if you said that to a truther, whatever narrative you're talking about, maybe it's something that happens, something you're told about that happens in Minnesota or something. They would think you mean, oh, the truth, what really happened in this event is the opposite of what they're telling us happened. I think that's where a lot of truthers go naturally. They're like, I don't believe what I'm looking at because of who's telling me it, which is not a bad way to operate. So it must be the opposite. The thing I'm looking at must not have happened at all. And I think the reason this approach of really paying attention to the premise, when I say the first mistake people make is the central premise, it's what you're talking about. The premise literally being the story that is being told is the premise. By definition, that's the premise. But I think that people in general do not think of stories or narratives as premises, as foundations onto which reality can be built. I think they think of narrative as a translation of reality or a lie about reality, right? A translation that's either true or false or some mix of the two. And I think that's why it's important what you're writing about with chicken, egg, chicken is that, like that, before you even get down all the various ways of approaching this, in greater detail, and kind of formulating a manner of approaching a battle space that's defined by this. I think it really is the beginning point of saying, are you engaging with an event or an actual that is the foundation of what you're looking at and arguing about, or is the story the foundation onto which the actual was layered?
Yeah, the actual in many cases doesn't have to exist. Like they could just tell us stories. And, one of the other things that I mentioned in there is that, Bernays goes through all of the tools that a propagandist can use, setting up events, getting focus groups, having academics look at something, getting prominent members from the community, all these various ways to convince the public of an idea so that when it's presented later on through the mouth of a politician, everybody already understands that they want X and not Y, and this politician is the vehicle for them to get X, so they choose that politician. Well, all this stuff is created through stories, and now they have additional storytelling devices. They can use artificial intelligence to create video scenes of things that never happened, but that are totally plausibly believable by anyone who looks at those videos. You can make a video of absolutely anything, and if it looks too good, well, just make it blurrier and then put it up on TV, and everybody will be like, oh, that's what real events look like. They're very blurry. They all look like they were filmed on a 1990s camcorder. And we're like, oh, that's, of course, those hostages are real. They were filmed on a 1990s camcorder. Of course, that plane flying out of Kabul is real. It was filmed in the 1990s. And it's just like, okay, so you can tell that AI is too clean and too, unnatural in some way. Well, if you just make it blurrier, it's not going to look like that. And then you can show it to everybody. They'll believe it. And so they have AI. They have Hollywood production. I mean, dude, Yevgeny Prigozhin was a movie producer. Okay. Steve Bannon, by the way, was a producer.
And Mnuchin.
What's that? Mnuchin.
And Steve Mnuchin, too.
Yeah. But the idea that these ops can't be filmed and run, they are filmed and run. I mean, you had the clip, and who knows if this guy is actually a Mossad or whatever, but you remember 6 months or a year ago, there was that video of Mossad talking to 60 Minutes being we film all this stuff. We just make up another world and tell them about that. Like, yes, that's what they do. And, if they want to have real events, if they want to actually kill some innocent people, well, they have paramilitaries that are going to do that, where the paramilitary people are either well paid enough to be hitmen against innocent people, or they believe so much in a cause and that the people that they are ostensibly fighting are evil and that they deserve it. That's not something that can't be found in the world. And so the idea that we know that we are being fed info ops, but we don't want to reject the info op in full because we believe that there are real stakes in the story that we're being told. Well, okay, you might be right. And if it makes you feel good and sensitive to engage on that level, well, hey, be my guest. But in the meantime, you are being hoodwinked because the op that you are consuming is actually there for a purpose. And the purpose is that you believe it. And if you believe it, the way you interact with it is already a win for them. Okay. The only win for us is by withholding belief altogether and never engaging in any of that stuff, so that the tactic is so guaranteed to fail that they will stop trying. Okay. That's the only victory. There is no other victory. And that victory is requires withholding belief in every single one of these circumstances.
That's very well said. And it makes me think another way of one of the terms I just thought of that I've been using a lot lately is my favorite word, verisimilitude. And it's actually very well stated and ironic what you're saying about grainy footage. I think I was saying months ago, if I send Chris or Zach or something a video of Baby Bright playing with his DJ table on my phone when I'm walking by the playroom, it's crystal 4K high def. Do you want to do, you can see each individual key and the grains in the carpet and whether or not I vacuumed and like, is that a speck of soap on the window or something there? But it's like, man, these correspondents out in Ukraine, they're getting shelled so much that all they can manage to do is get something up to Starlink that's a 360p PlayStation 1 cutscene run through a Ukrainian server. And it's like, man, we're lucky we even have this much to see what's going on out there. So, but the irony there is that verisimilitude is the feeling of something being real. Now that can be used. I've often used that in the realm of storytelling. That's like filmmaking is a big thing. A really great example of this, actually, people use in genre fiction. Star Wars is a great example of this, good and bad. One of the reasons that even when they do anonymous polling, etc., that the original Star Wars series from the 70s and 80s feels more real to people watching it than the George Lucas directed prequel trilogy that came out 20, 30 years later, is that the prequel trilogy, despite looking objectively way better, state-of-the-art effects, clean sound stages, pristine costumes, like just better lighting, etc., people instinctively do not believe those movies because they looked too real. Everybody looks like they're walking around on a set. They look like they're walking around on a stage production. All the vehicles and futuristic tech is shiny and clean. You use the word clean. In 1979 Star Wars, everything is dirty. Part of that was the aesthetic George Lucas was going for, but part of that was because they didn't have a big budget and they were using a bunch of bullshit and like putting stuff together on the set. But it created this verisimilitude where the audience is like, man, that looks like a real place that I can go to. This looks like this guy's just sitting on a desert in Tunisia. And it's like, well, he is. He literally is sitting on a desert in Tunisia. And I think the same thing, to your point, is going on in the info war, where it's like, hey, this video in 4K coming out of Ukraine looks kind of weird, and I can see every detail of it, whether it's real or fake. This thing that I only have the barest suggestion of what's going on feels like it confirms what I've been told is going on over there, which is very chaotic. And then to pass it back to you, I think the other important thing there is one of the pushbacks that we get a lot on this overall framing is that we are arguing, or that you are arguing in particular, that real things are not happening. And I think another way, what I thought of when you were explaining that is, it's not just that real things can be and are happening. It's that those real things that might be happening, you kind of mentioned like false flag events, trauma events, are themselves being used to retroactively strengthen the story that was being told. And I think a lot of truthers get that backwards. Like they're like, oh, the story amplifies the actual event. And they understand narrative warfare from that lens. But I think a lot of what you're writing about is the reverse is a more powerful process. That the actual event is used to amplify the effect of the story that was originally told.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that I try to at least hammer that home in the article is talking about the considerable amount of power that is wielded by this group of elites, however you want to define them. I think that we can certainly understand that people who are charting the course of the future of humanity are probably not leaving these grand projects up to the spontaneous arising of events in the world that might, if they are framed properly, help them push their agendas. Okay, they are not going to wait around for real events to emerge on the backs of which they are going to sell their program. The program comes first. They figure out what people need to believe in order to be willing to implement their programs, to be enthusiastic and feel incentivized to implement their programs. And then they are going to work backwards from that conclusion, figuring out what beliefs they need to instill in people, and then what stories are going to help them instill those beliefs, because the beliefs are going to guide the behaviors. The stories and the emotional manipulation are going to help people form the beliefs. So they reverse engineer all this stuff and then play it forward. All we see is the playing forward of these events. And because of the way that we think about time and the way we want to believe that these events are spontaneously occurring in the world, we mistake what is actually happening, and we find ourselves once again hoodwinked, once again subjected, once again exploited by people who actually understand that this is the system as it operates. People can argue until they're blue in the face and tell me that, oh, they know that this event is not fake, that you can't call everything fake. Well, that's great. But until people actually understand that the world can operate in this other way and recognize it when it is happening, and I don't see that ability springing forward anywhere. Well, until that happens, why am I going to take anybody seriously when they try to tell me, oh, I know this event is real because you can't call everything fake? Okay, well, if we're going to be 6-year-olds about things, I guess you can just start saying anything and I'm supposed to take it seriously, and then back off the epistemology that is going to turn out to be true 9 times out of 10. I'm not saying every event is fake. I don't know. Here's the point. You don't know either. And that's the point that really actually matters. Many of these things are unknowable. We are being given stories that are mediated at least one level because they're coming through the screen, but probably at 2 levels, 3 levels, 4 levels, 5 levels. And we don't know how much orchestration is behind any of those things. And if we're just going to ignore all of that so that we can reaffirm our belief that the window to the world is somehow telling us true things sometimes, and that we can parse when they are, man, all of that is just such nonsense. We should be honest about the fact that these things are unknowable to us. They are too far away for us to grasp. If we are lucky enough to be able to call somebody who saw the event in person, we still cannot know whether or not they were experiencing that event from a vantage point that would allow them a full view of what happened, and then the ability to communicate that to us. And that's literally 1 degree of separation, and it is already broken down.
One of the dumbest, or I should say, some of the dumbest things I've been told in the last few years are coming from first or secondhand knowledge. Like somebody, I think, was it you and I who talked about this? I think it was you and I who talked about this recently. You were bringing up videos from J6 as an example of like how staged a lot of the events on J6 were. Well, obviously this audience doesn't need to be convinced of that, but the point you had been making was like the people who were there after that did not know events were being staged, are those good sources of information regarding what did or did not happen at these events? And that's why like there are people that are almost look at us incredulously when it's like, oh, my wife works in the government and she knows this and that. It's like I would be far less likely to take firsthand accounts about institutions I have no trust in than I would to take the accounts of people who have no trust in those systems. And again, those don't have to be bad people. I think that's more the point. Like you can be earnestly hoodwinked. And you mentioned that too. I think it's another point that's worth driving home. It's not just about being hoodwinked. It's that when you are engaging in the details, the detailed dissection, or rather, as you said earlier, the dissection of the details of the events we're being told about, you said that's a hoodwinking, and I think that's an important thing to drive home because that is a way of powering the op that is being forwarded, right? It's like if you are engaging, even earnestly, especially earnestly, with a really minute dissection of whether or not the paragliding go-kart incident was real as described to you, you are in the act of doing that, powering the verisimilitude of the narrative, right? Whether or not it's real, you're not just being hoodwinked, like passively it's like, yeah, the hoodwinking is part of what is powering the hoodwinking. It's like a loop, right?
Yeah, I think I would have to have you flesh that out a little bit more. But you're talking about like engaging with it in the first place is already giving it power?
Let me try to put it a non-burning bright way, because I was thinking about it in real time. I've been using the Ouroboros term a lot lately, so I've been thinking about it a lot. But when you were talking about being hoodwinked, the people who are engaging with these narratives or the actuals are themselves being hoodwinked, right? We are told, for example, you brought up Minneapolis. Lesbian lady gets shot in a car. That's the actual event, okay? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that happened. The earnest truthers, their instinct is to heavily dissect the details of the actual event to determine whether or not they're being lied to about that event. And when you were talking about, you mentioned that is itself being hoodwinked, right? Because you're kind of wasting time doing that because the premise had already been set up. The premise that ICE bad, that means innocent people are going to be killed by ICE. So the way I took what you were saying is truthers who are dissecting every little detail about whether or not that is true are actually lending power to it. And I was just going one step further to say, spending time on all of the details and trying to suss out whether you're being lied to or not about all the nuances of this video is itself powering the narrative. It's keeping the narrative elevated. And it's like, I guess another way of saying that would be, truthers, I think, often think they are fighting against fake news by trying to dissect all the little details of the narratives and maybe disprove what the media is telling them. And maybe you could argue that they are totally happy with you doing that because you're powering it, right? You're powering this. The story is being elevated, whether or not you're trying to disprove it.
Yeah, and I think that we saw a lot of that in the aftermath of the Alex Petty thing. But one place we saw a ton of it, and maybe this is like the most, was after the Charlie Kirk trauma event last fall. I mean, the number of videos that went viral dissecting like the angles and echoes of sounds on the videos. I mean, people devoted hours, days, weeks to that dig in particular, and all of that was a complete and total waste of time. And like all the hours that people spent tracking down the Cybertruck bomber in front of the Trump Hotel in Vegas, that was a complete total waste of time. You know, like none of these things have been answered. I'm not sure that that any of the explorations that people have gone on have really borne fruit at the end of the day. The most important thing to understand about these events, when you can see the orchestration, when you can see psyops being run on them, on the backs of them, the most important thing to understand is that it's a psyop. Okay. The details about the particular events are, if they are important at all, which sometimes they are not, but I'll grant people that sometimes they are, they're of secondary importance to the fact that you are being psyoped. That is the most important part of the situation to analyze. What is the psyop intending to do? What does it want me to do? How does it want me to respond? And if I can recognize how it wants me to respond, well, then the thing I'm not going to do is that very thing. And I think that that's not that difficult to task to complete on a regular basis. And again, I'm not saying like don't ever touch these things. People should be interested in whatever they want, and maybe somebody exploring these things is going to turn up a needle in a haystack, and everybody will be the better for it. Okay, so I'm not discouraging that. I'm saying you need to take a couple steps back from all this information right from the beginning, so that we have a proper relationship with what it is we're actually witnessing here. And what we are witnessing is a story mediated by a screen that is specifically designed to put certain things in front of us. And that has to be included in the analysis of all of these events. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but I pulled up.
I want to say if you wanted to show something here.
So this I put in the article. This is actually from Deadwood, and this is not something that we recorded. I found this on YouTube, but we have seen this event play out live when we do the guard events in Deadwood.
All. I ain't a cheating, and I don't like what you boys are insinuating.
Well, insinuate this, Swanson. You ain't nothing but lying, cheating, no good piece of buffalo fly.
You're
lower than my hand.
That's enough. All that I can take from you little runt boys. Let's settle this like men in the street.
You hear that, Brody? Yeah. Johnson's calling us out. Central Turkey Creek ain't nothing more than Mr. Chicken. Chicken Creek, yeah, Johnson.
In the street, boys, now.
Get ready to die, Johnson. Yeah, Johnson, get ready to die.
Come on.
Get it done. I like to read that. Johnson!
Never insult a man's honor, boys.
You shot them both.
It was a fair fight.
You shot him over a lousy game of cards.
The man.
I mean, you get the picture, right? So this is quite clearly a staged event where two men are shot dead in the street with a number of witnesses. And the event, the way I break this down in the article is like, at what point does this performance become a real event? Like if a doctor runs out into the street, like saying that he's going to save these people, if all of the people viewing this, rather than just watching and taking pictures and knowing that it's an act, if they all believe it's real and people are screaming and crying and running away, the doctor comes over, somebody looks like they're bleeding out, and the doctor's like, give me space, I'm going to save this guy. And then an ambulance pulls up and the rest of it, like people who are witnessing all of that begin at some point to be inclined to think, oh, something real happened here. Maybe they were just doing an act. And it's the, the Brandon Lee thing. Where they're like, there's a blank in this gun and no, it's a real bullet and he got killed. At some point, like you add elements of real and fake, and the way that the event is perceived actually changes. And so then it becomes like, how real does the event have to be for it to be seen as real? How fake does it have to be seen as fake? And, again, I'll tell people, look at the Alex Preddy stuff. Go look at the George Floyd video now, nearly 6 years later. Does that look as real as people thought it looked at the time? And some people at the time were like, hey, that's obviously fake. And everyone was like, oh, you can't say that, it's racist. We see the ghost of Kyiv. Is that fake? Well, yeah, that turns out that was fake. That was video game footage. Well, what about the paragliding go-karts? What about the last plane out of Kabul? Like, which of these are discernibly real in a way that attaches to the same reality we all share, right? And not all of them are. And we have to be honest about that.
Yeah, it's funny too, because even in the dual footage you're showing, like if they weren't dialing it up in terms of acting, there is no verifiable difference. If you're standing there, I mean, in the street, there's no difference between watching people shoot smoky fake muskets at each other and actual guns, because you can't see bullets. Like it's just kind of a very simple thing. Like if you've ever seen footage of somebody actually getting shot, it looks like nothing is happening. It looks like somebody points something at somebody else and somebody else falls down. Maybe there's a flash, maybe there's a bang. It looks like more fake than something that's in a movie often, which is kind of funny. Like movies often have this hyper reality to them, that is not the way things look when they're happening in real time. And, what it also makes me think is, I've had this discussion with Ash a little bit with you, I think, but I think it's resurrected a bit in light of what you're saying about these very real events we've been told about. We've seen these infamous videos. Something that went really viral in the last week was the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise AI fight scene video. Did you guys see this? Maybe it's worth me pulling it up. Did you see this, Chris?
Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. No, I don't think I did.
Let me find it quickly. So
AI is getting crazy.
Oh, it's getting nuts. So this might not be the absolute best specific footage of it, but this was a 15-second AI video that went extremely viral over the weekend. created by the reason it went viral, a few different levels. One, the verisimilitude to it at first glance is very, very high. The fidelity is very, very high. But the real reason it went viral is this was prompted by a 2-sentence prompt. It was not something where, you know, Hollywood artists or advanced coders are taking AI and going into the lab with it and iterating and being like, all right, if you just glanced at this, you would think it really might be from a new action movie between Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. This was entirely produced by a Chinese AI system based on a prompt of Brad Pitt fights Tom Cruise about the Epstein files, I think was the one I saw. But take a look at it, 15 seconds.
You killed Jeffrey Epstein, you animal! He was a good man!
He knew too much about our Russia operations. He had to die, and now you die too.
Now, the reason I want to bring that up is if you're like really looking for it, you can see that the close-up on Brad Pitt's maybe a little hitchy, right? But the funny thing is, and I've railed on modern movies and how bad the effects are, everything is filmed on a fucking green screen now, to the point where a sitcom of people talking in a room is often filmed on a green screen with false lighting, and it makes real actors filming real scenes look fake. One of the most infamous examples of this is the Hobbit trilogy. Looks awful to everybody who watches it. It's filmed with better cameras and better effects than the Lord of the Rings films that were made 15 years earlier. But it looks more fake because it's hyper realistic. And this video is entirely generated. Brad Pitt was not there. They just asked the video to source images online and made that, right? And I think, you know, the doomer way of looking at that is being like, oh my God, we can't trust anything. But I want to use it to actually bolster the point you're making with a white pill attached to it, which is to say, is there an argument to be made that the reason people get hoodwinked so easily by realistic looking online videos, just the simple fact that they just don't believe that they can be shown something that they think looks real that is not real, right? And like, that's kind of the white pill people doom out about like, well, man, look how real that looks. That's scary. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, now think about everything else that you're looking at, you know, from this timeline forward. Whereas when you just go back to what you just mentioned 2-3 years ago, for whatever it was, George Floyd, like there was no even inkling in the collective mind of this might not be real.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
the AI thing is just a different ballgame because we don't know when that started. And you talked about those Hobbit films that came out. I guess that was like the mid 2000s decade.
2010. Right? It was like 2000, 10-ish range.
Okay. And I agree with you that something was very, it just looked off. It didn't seem right when you looked at it. And the other films, you know, you watch them now and it's clearly of an earlier era, but there is something that looks more natural. You know, sometimes they talk about the uncanny valley and the rest of that. But if we are getting this tech right now, how long has the military industrial complex had it? How long has Hollywood had it? And how much of what we have already seen, how much of that stuff is fake? It's not like these problems just began. We've been watching news and television programming. One of the things I talk about in this article is stories that admit they are fiction, like television series, movies, novels, for instance, and stories that refuse to admit they are fiction, like science, news, reality television, and the rest, where you are being told that the substance of this story is something real in the world, and we are kind of narrating something real to you. Well, sure, on some sliding scale, maybe there are elements that attach to the world, but there don't have to be all that many of them, to be honest. There is scripting in these things. And so we look back at news, we look back at some of these events that we've seen online in the last decade, maybe 2 decades. Were all of them real? You know, we see one of the big things that when the P. Diddy stuff was happening, there was a video of him dragging a girlfriend down a hallway and abusing some woman. Now, am I saying P. Diddy didn't abuse women? I have no idea what P. Diddy did. I'm entirely, I understand that it is entirely possible that all of that was real. I'm just using it as an example. Could they have faked that? If your answer is no, they could not have faked that, you're just not being honest about where we're at in these things. And so it's possible that they sell us virtually anything because everything is downstream from the military industrial complex, global intelligence organizations, and transnational corporations. Those are the people who own the media infrastructure through which all these stories are projected to us. And to think that there's no influence in there anywhere, I mean, if other people want to think that, that's fine. I can't bring myself there anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think it's a big point on the just how people are engaging with the news. Like even that terminology, the news versus fiction, something we've talked about quite a bit on Story Hour. I've said with my anecdotes as explaining or defending rather years ago my choices to write fiction predominantly over nonfiction, and one of the ways I defended that was to say I think it's more honest, or that I can be more honest. And part of that was, I just kind of said it in the moment, but I've really come to believe that over time, more so than when I said it. And part of that, I think, is the audience, the sort of wiring or premise with which the audience is engaging with the content. And, you know, it's kind of funny, like we both have experience with writing in various modes, and, you know, we've both got experience dealing with a lot of creatives. You know, you dealt with people who were in the movie industry and script writers and everything, and I dealt with book writers a lot, fiction writers. And, you know, I kind of wonder, especially with Hollywood right now, even leaving AI out of it, that's like a more of an existential threat that they all feel like in some ways. I think there's also good things about that, even for them. But it makes me wonder, like, do you think the Hollywood people who are in the know of like, yeah, the news is kind of bullshit and fake, you know, they ever get mad that the burden of proof for fake Hollywood movies seems to be higher than the burden of proof? By that, I don't mean, it's exactly what you're saying. People going to a Mission Impossible movie using Tom Cruise, they know that it's fake. They are engaging with it as knowing that it is fiction. There's an honest exchange, to your point, between Paramount and the people in the theater. But those people, if they see a wonky looking Tom Cruise running across an airplane wing, they're going to be mad. They're going to come out of that being, and you're like, why are you mad, man? Like, you knew it was fake. It's like, yeah, but, you know, Tom Cruise does his own stunts. It's like, well, but you know he's like all harnessed in and it's fake. It's like, yeah, but he's doing a lot of real stuff built on an entirely fake premise of what I'm looking at, but it looks real even though I know it's fake. But then they turn Fox on or CNN and it's like, there is no need for the news to even make anything look real, basically because the audience they're dealing with is operating from a foundation that it already is real and must be real because it's the news.
Yeah, and I would say that the science is treated the same way, and that's what got us in so much trouble in 2020. People think that there is nothing wrong with the science. It's the best we can do at any given moment, and it's only wrong in the right direction because we haven't advanced quite far enough yet. Well, no, they just made a lot of shit up. And by the same token that we believe everything else, we believe all of the science because it comes to us on authority. We're told that the subject matter is too difficult for us to understand. And so we have to leave it to the experts. The experts are all highly specialized in their fields. They are conditioned to refuse to talk about other fields where they aren't experts. So nobody ever takes a generalized approach. And then it's all of these siloed areas of knowledge that barely overlap. And it's like, okay, well, that's the best stuff from A, that's the best stuff from B, that's the best stuff from C, that's the best stuff from D, and so on. These are the true things because these are the best explanations from each one of these things. Let's see how these true things fit together. Well, it's not necessary that any of those things are actually true. So putting them together just makes the pile of bullshit a whole lot larger, and people will just ingest the whole pile of bullshit and then think they know everything about the science. That's crazy stuff. And this is how we are conditioned to learn by our schooling, which for the most part is done in either state organizations directly, these state schools, or they are private schools and colleges and universities that are also funded by the state. So it's like you can't totally escape the system at any of those points. And we have to be cognizant of the system effect at all times, I would say.
It makes me think, I wonder what you think about, I thought of the word trust there. You're, even with that AI video of Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, I wrote down in my notes, a trustless society, like moving toward a trustless society. That's my white pill sort of argument, premise. I don't know if it's correct, but if I were to argue that AI accelerationism, I guess maybe another way to put this would be people knowing that AI is accelerating to this degree. Like they're engaging with that video. That video didn't go viral because it looks cool. It went viral because everybody knows it's not real. So there's this understanding of AI accelerationism. And I had said, well, this is decreasing trust in what people are being shown. We've talked about this a lot. G-Money obviously is the most infamous at Badlands for talking about trustless society through the lens of Bitcoin and finance, but I think a lot of us talk about it through information. And you just mentioned, the reason I thought of is you were talking about trust the science, right? And it's like, okay, the first word there, the foundation, before you even get to all the problems of the science, is the need to trust anything in the first place, right? And it also makes me think of trust the plan as being, it's like, well, is the plan premised on the trust for it? Because that doesn't seem like a very good plan. But I don't know. I wonder what you think of just trust in general as it relates to this, to the info war and to your approach to it.
Yeah, well, we talked earlier about the source of truth, and I would say that every belief is a faith-based belief ultimately. If you pick apart your beliefs and go far enough, you're taking something on faith, even if it's just down to like our understanding of our base layer reality. We might be wrong about that. We might be in a simulation, in which case we're wrong about the nature of our base layer reality. I think Jonathan Drake might still be in the chat. He talks a lot about ether, polymathonon. These guys talk about ether physics. If that is part of the base layer of our reality, well, then a lot of the things that we think about science and the way our world operates are different than we know them. And so there are some pretty foundational and fundamental assumptions that go into the way that we perceive our world. And if we want to be clear about all of our beliefs, we have to strip them down to those kind of fundamental elements. And if we see that there are unknowns down there, and there are, well, we need to be really careful about how much we believe we know things, because beyond God, there is nothing that we should be like rushing into forming faith-based beliefs over. Certainly not the plan we don't know. Certainly not the science some guys in white coats at a university made up. I'm not saying none of this stuff can be substantiated. I'm saying that it's not substantiated on the way in a lot of the time. We can progress scientifically, quote unquote, simply through innovation and like A/B testing and using the actual scientific method. We don't have to believe stories about spirituality and metaphysics that are then run through a bunch of math equations and brought to us as though they are these truths about the physical world taught to us by these great mathematicians. That ain't how it works. That's getting the chicken and the egg equation backwards.
Yeah. You know, actually, on that note, this is a whole other topic, but something just my intuition is like I'm a believer, for whatever it's worth, at this present time, that Bitcoin is an interesting decentralized technology that may have a big role to play in the future. Could end up being a big rug pull or getting co-opted or whatever. But what you just said, the biggest piece of sort of FUD out there, the biggest narrative, the biggest anti-Bitcoin narrative right now, besides that it was Epstein is Satoshi, that's the newest one, so maybe that's what's going on, is quantum. The quantum thing. Now, of course, if you ask anybody about what quantum is, they immediately outsource whatever they know about it to other people who know about it. And then when you go to those people outsource what they know about it to other people who know about it. Now, all of them agree that it doesn't exist right now, but that it hypothetically could exist in the future, and that if it does exist in the future, it hypothetically could then present a threat. And I think that's a similar thing where it's like, well, I suppose all of that is true, but nobody engaging in the argument about like Bitcoin versus quantum physics or quantum computing seems to be admitting that what they're actually arguing about is right now a fictional story about a possible future that then could affect the thing they're looking at right now. Again, and it's like, that could come true. Mm-hmm. But I just think that's kind of a funny, like, that is being talked about as science. But I think you and I have also mentioned in different conversations, one of the big problems with science, the science as it's talked about, is that theoretical science is now it's interchangeable with science, where there used to be this understanding of like science is something that you can observe and repeat and test against. But now it's like, well, there's theoretical science, which consists of building a bunch of premises and then running thought experiments on how those premises would manifest in reality.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that. And there's just a lot of bullshit being fed through the number game that substantiates all this stuff. For instance, they will tell us that following public polling to make political decisions is doing like data-based and science-based analysis to political situations. Well, that's not true. That's public polling, which is already bullshit, and that they have various statistical processes that they run on these numbers that they then conclude make these numbers statistically valid over a population of some certain size, makes this a scientific approach to politics. Well, that's just not true. That's like a category error, and it's smuggling in a lot of really sound scientific principles, which I'm not trying to say that there aren't those. I'm saying that like that's not some catch-all that you can just put into anything and then give this, and this is how it's used, to give like a sheen of legitimacy to whatever claim is being made. Like, oh, we have a study that backs this up. Oh, wow. You got a study to back up the thing that you wanted to say. How did you come up with it? Well, that's so amazing that you just pulled these numbers out of the natural world and it proves the thing that you've already been saying for so many years. I mean, that's the science as it's being given to us now. And the fact that they have the word "the" in front of it already, it's like this body of knowledge that has already been vetted by the priestly class. And now it's being handed down to you. It's not for you to question or investigate this knowledge. It's for you to accept this knowledge. And at that point, you got to realize that you are being asked to make form a faith-based belief in this claim about the world, which is just not the substance of faith. You do not put your faith in facts about the world, things you think you know about the news, and I mean, all of these subjects should just be off limits. Like, don't form beliefs about these things. Okay.
Yeah.
Just like, don't form beliefs about them.
We need like a citation system.
Might be another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like you've been cited. Did you form a fucking belief about that? I can see you doing it. Yeah, one of the things I think about even with the quantum stuff is like, even if I want to I try to play the thought experiments of being like, let me engage with this as if it is not only real and possible, but inevitable, which is what the framing is. The people talking about it don't ever apply it outside of a tiny silo of being targeted at like this one specific thing whose merits they are trying to destabilize. It'll be like, so you're telling me that we're going to inevitably have magical supercomputers that can do all calculations at once in real time, like infinitely fast. Okay, that means alchemy becomes possible. Like mathematically, it means that all the limiters placed on all other known science dissolve immediately, which might be true, but that means that you can now create gold. You can turn iron into gold. You can, have limitless energy, and all these things might be possible. But I just think that's one of the things that like the sciencers don't think about. They'll apply this massive, unproven, theoretical based idea to like one specific thing, and then go like, okay, now do that with everything else. How would this idea apply to everything else in your reality? Do you have time to hang out any longer?
Yeah,
or are you
we can hang out for a bit. I think that we talked, well, maybe this is too, I don't know if you want to go through this now or not. I talked with General Quast on his show about this Italian physicist named Federico Fagin, who was, he like invented the computer chip, or was like at some point in that process. But he has this book called Irreducible, where he begins talking at length about quantum and what it means. And it seems to me that what's being done right now is that science, in scientific language, is attempting to smuggle that which God can do back into the materialist realm. And they are essentially calling it quantum, because they have realized that it's no longer tenable to pretend to the world like these are different domains, that there is no effect of the spiritual world or the unseen realm, or however you want to think of it, on this quote unquote real world, which is to scientific materialists just the material world, that consciousness arises from the brain, and that all these other claims that have kind of been taken for granted under the faith-based belief system of scientific materialism, that's no longer sufficient, and that the scientists can't really skate by pretending that it is. And so, and I'm not trying to slight Fagin by saying this, he seems like he is in a process of moving away from that materialism, and this quantum discussion as it's being had seems like some sort of bridge in that process.
I think that's a great thought. And, I remember this random, the conversations you have that stick with you. But my wife and I, like 10 years ago, had a conversation about God and the nature of reality, and all that, as you do when you're wooing a potential mate. You like tell them everything you think about reality. But one of the things, even as a kind of liberal at the time, even though I was a bit disillusioned, I was probably a science-y type of liberal. But I did say at that time, I didn't understand the inherent nihilism that seems to be baked into a lot of science. I wasn't talking about quantum at that time. I was talking about space and the idea of the universe. Mm-hmm. So there was this concept of how vast the universe is, and then we were talking about theoretical physics around black holes, and how there could be pockets to other dimensions and realities. Like the most Marvel Cinematic Universe type of science. The real mm-hmm. shit. Mm-hmm. And my point was to say, I've never felt like that doesn't make me feel bad about whether or not God exists, where I feel like it's often used that way. Like it often feels like, hey, the science is telling you that the universe is so infinitely vast and there's all these different dimensions and all these different realities and whatever it is, and like that's how fucking small you are, and maybe the unspoken thing there is that's how meaningless you are. I do think that that's part of the intent. I just mean, to your point about quantum, even as an atheist kind of at that time, that to me would never disprove the existence of an infinitely powerful, all-knowing being. If anything, it could bolster that point, right? And maybe it's a similar thing with quantum, where you're like, are you trying to disprove God because you seem to be helping to prove that there's some incredible shit going on, or that's possible in this reality that the science is not responsible for?
Yeah, I think that's all. I mean, all this stuff. At some point it comes down to like perspectives and worldviews and spiritual outlooks and the rest of it. You know, when you go back to first principles, it's a matter of like what we are capable of observing and what we have observed, and what we are capable of observing and what we have observed are the range of that knowledge is much, much smaller than what we are being told about the physics of the universe, which we are again led to believe people know a lot about because of math. Well, let me tell you something. You can't know about those things because of math. That just ain't how that works. And nothing could possibly be more obvious than that. And we have a world that we observe and that all of us experience in the same way. None of us experience it in different ways, except most of us have a belief system that says the way we observe it is actually totally wrong. In fact, it's the opposite of that. How do you know? Math.
You know, it's funny. In a former life, you were a big sports guy.
Yeah.
And as was I, and I still like to humiliate myself with that from time to time. But as an avowed Tom Brady defender, one of the disciples who grew up in that era, I think to further your point about the math, I think it's also just selective. Like, even if the math could somehow prove to people's satisfactions truths about the world, they don't actually then operate on that basis. Yeah. And an example I would use, an easy example, is sports science and how mathified it's all become, right? Like QB rating and efficiency and EPA per play. And like, if you're a sports nerd, you know all this shit, right? And it's like, well, this guy did, and it's like, oh, that's true. Like, the EPA per play is fucking, that's some grade A EPA per play. And then it's like, you know what stat they never talk about? Like, who wins the games? Like, is it possible that the person who just keeps fucking doing the thing that all the maths are meant to describe and get you closer to doing, despite all of those maths being like, that guy shouldn't be the best at this thing because we've done all of the math? And it's like, well, but isn't like the wins the ultimate math thing? That's just like one of those, it's the scoreboard argument, right? But I think like it is something that's lost in a lot of the science, is that it's rendering everything so complicated that you're like, hey, have you looked at the thing to just see like what it looks like it's doing? Rather than, and I guess that's maybe like the old Greek philosopher approach to science was like, hey, go look at that thing and see what you think about it. And now it's become like, let's get in a lab and hypothesize using math about all of these theoretical things and then build foundations on top of those theoretical things. We don't need to observe any of it to confirm or deny any of its reality.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's kind of in line with what we were just talking about. It's not really a holistic approach to knowledge or to what you're seeing. It's a number of specifics that you think if you have the right mix of each one of these specifics, then you're going to be able to create like the perfect athlete or player or performance or whatever it might be. But there's just something else there, an experience besides the I don't know, amalgamation of these different statistical characteristics that a player might have. I mean, Michael Jordan, there's something in Michael Jordan that is not in LeBron James. And people who have that conversation can go on and on about LeBron's size, and he was a better assist man, and he was a better rebounder, and all of these, whatever arguments they make. You can still watch basketball and understand that there's something in Michael Jordan that is not in other people. And it's not to say that it's not in any other person, although when you're talking about Jordan,
you could argue.
You could argue that. But you can also just see that watching. Like there are other elements at play that we can't detect in the kind of material, and we want to measure everything, and it's not always about measuring things.
Yeah, and I guess that Jordan, again, the scoreboard argument where it's like, even if you want to take the extreme mathy math approach, you just be like, why don't we ever just talk about the statistic of winning the most of the thing you're doing? It's like, isn't that the ultimate statistic? Like the math people, they're like, we don't talk about wins. That doesn't matter. Or any of that. Like,
want to be able to prove that Tom Brady is the greatest. And
that's what this is.
Possible.
This is all a backdoor into that. All right, I want to get to one other topic.
Okay.
But I want to, I think, do a final sponsor, which is our friends at 1775 Coffee. Still haven't tried 1775 Coffee? Now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped, only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast, hits hard, smooth medium roast, and the Vitality Mushroom Coffee for clean energy that's toxin-free and mold-free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio. Grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. 1775 Coffee. I never partook in a frother for my milk until this past year, and I still don't know how I feel about it every time I do it. I'm like 50-50 on it.
Do you have like one of those like automatic frother things or what?
No, it's just like a crude instrument that just spins really fast and,
but
froths the milk.
Doesn't the milk have to be heated up, or is it just like...
No, it'll just froth anything. It'll froth ice cold milk.
It'll froth anything.
It'll froth literally anything. That's how far the science has come.
Are you familiar with Jim Jeffries, the comedian, and his panda joke?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to have to pull this up. He's going to turn into OnlyLands here in a second. What were you about to say?
Well, I was going to introduce a very serious topic.
Oh, okay, before you do that.
Serious. Yeah. I don't want to rug pull us in advance.
Yeah. You just were talking about
frothing anything.
Yeah, be able to froth anything.
It's like meet the Fockers. I have nipples, Greg.
Yes, meet the frothers, and by frothers I mean pandas. And Jim Jeffries, I think, turned into a bit of a shit lib in the late 20-teens. So forgive that aspect of it. I'm not suggesting that he should be anybody's new best friend, but this is when you said that, this is what it made me think of. You got it up?
Yeah.
There we go.
Our panda's a bunch of cunts. I'm done with pandas. I'll tell you why, right? Every fucking living creature loves pandas. The panda doesn't have a natural predator on the planet, and they're dying out because they're fucking big. Fuck them. Let them die out. The pandas don't fuck each other, therefore they don't have babies, therefore we've got no fucking pandas. They're dead weight. Let's lose the fucking pandas. We've tried. We have fucking tried. We, the human race, put pandas in cages together and try to help them fuck, but they don't. We go, there's a panda, go fuck the panda. And they just look at each other. You put me in a cage with anything. Anything. And after a week, I'll fuck it.
Just to make sure we were on signal. Yeah, have you ever seen it'll disturb you if you've seen videos of pandas attacking people.
I have never seen that.
It's you've got homework after the show, as they do sometimes, and they'll
should we
they'll mess you up something fierce.
Yeah, I don't want to tangle with a panda. Should we watch that Federico Fagin clip?
Yes.
Though, before we switch up.
Probably derailed.
First of all, there is no clear boundary between classical and quantum. In other words, we again want to put things into boxes. That's the first mistake. There are no separate boxes. One is holistic. The reality, deeper reality, is holistic, means it's not made of separable parts. And it's not made of separable concepts, which is even deeper. So even true or false is an approximation of reality valid under certain conditions. Like 1 and 0 are valid for a certain temperature and pressure of the computer. If you change the temperature, it doesn't work anymore, because that distinction can no longer be valid in a world where there is a continuity. There is, everything is connected with everything else. So, but we don't want that world because you cannot control that world. So the problem now is a problem of power and control behind this desire to have a deterministic and reductionistic world, which is the materialist philosophy, which is it's time to abandon that, because quantum physics already is saying that that doesn't work. According to quantum physics, the universe is holistic, is not made of separable parts. Everything is connected. Everything is connected from the inside. But according to most physicists, there is no inside, because everything, they think that all that exists is actually what you can measure. But that is not possible. Nobody can understand why quantum computers work, because their actual operation cannot occur in space-time. It must occur in what is called Hilbert space. But Hilbert space is supposed to be a mathematical abstraction. So how can you do operations in an abstract space of mathematics? You see, it's incoherent. But nobody wants to think deeply about this stuff, because nobody has ever taught how to think deeply about stuff. They want to solve the problem. Give me an equation, I'll solve the equations. But the equations are created by consciousness. It is consciousness that creates mathematics, not mathematics that creates consciousness. It took me 30 years to figure out that mathematics is created by consciousness, and therefore I cannot explain consciousness with mathematics. And I realized that I was trying to do the same because I was taught that way. I had to turn it around. Again, turn it around.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that, again, like, they don't want to use the God word, but it's like, it's an interesting way to think about basically retroactively proving the existence of God, but without using that terminology. And it also makes me think about, to loop this back into the theme of stories and narrative, one of the terms I use often in genre storytelling in particular, something that's important to nerds like me, is canon. It's like a large-scale version of verisimilitude, which is like, hey, I watched like the last 5 Marvel movies, and this guy acted a totally different way. And now in like movie 7, you're telling me that he's like a dickhead? That's an easy example of it. That's like a small one. But the reason nerds get mad about that is because you're violating canon, right? Like, you're violating the agreed upon rules of the false reality you are presenting to me. You told me that this guy acted this way under these circumstances, but this director came in and made him act a totally different way under the same circumstances without explaining the change through narrative. And I think that's often like those are those moments that I think can break people from the Matrix a little bit when you see a canon violation in reality, right? Like you're in the news. Like, hold on, you guys were just telling us that, you know, I mean, maybe the Epstein narrative is a good example of this, actually. Play devil's advocate with that, of saying, like, you were telling us that there was no such thing as elite pedophiles on a billionaire island 10 years ago. That was the canon. And now, like, oh yeah, well, we knew about that shit the whole time. It's just not important or true. So again, I don't think it invalidates anything we talked about in the beginning of the show with that, but it's kind of like a reality version of canon violations.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm with you on that. What was the thing you were about to bring up though?
So I wanted to, before we get out of here, hit people with a few of like your, I guess, approaches to the InfoWar. I know we're kind of doing that, but I think specific approaches, and that's a Freudian slip because the note I wrote down earlier, you said in a different context, a generalized approach. And what's funny is, for some reason, when you said a generalized approach, it reminded me of, in the intro to this show, there's a bunch of quotes and clips, and one of the ones I love the most is the Paul Atreides, where he says, "I see possible futures all at once." And I thought of that when you said generalized approach, but I wonder, you know, instead of just saying this is what gets you into trouble in the InfoWar, I think is what we've talked about a lot tonight. What are some of the ways you anchor yourself? It sounds like one of them is a generalized approach to sort of reality or to narratives or to however you form beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, part of that just comes from my background. Part of it comes from particularly the background in Hollywood. You know, it was my job to know people. Like I was essentially a professional networker within a high-end community of people in the entertainment business. And so you meet all these different people from all these different walks of life, and you don't know the depth of what, for instance, a talent agent does throughout their, you know, a year at work, but you know what their general job is going to be. And you've heard tens or hundreds of stories about doing that job on a regular basis. And you have friends who are talent agents, and they tell you stories about what's going on in work, and you have a pretty good idea of what talent agents do. And you have the same relationship with writers and directors and composers and cinematographers and actors and actresses and cameramen and the rest of it. And all of a sudden, without being in the industry at all and without having expert knowledge about any one of those particular jobs, you can kind of have an understanding of how these parts work together and what the big picture approach to a subject in general is. And I think that we can know more about our world operating in that way, knowing how the pieces work together and how they're arranged, then we can devoting all our time to specific pieces of that system and then getting down to the granular level of detail down each one of those avenues. And so you try to take that, or I try to take that same approach when it comes to these news stories and the rest of it. I want to know what the stories are being told for. We talk about the story forward approach to all this stuff. It's not that hard to know in a pretty quick and concise way, like where things are going, and then match the macro pattern to other situations. If the macro pattern is correct, it'll be predictive of how stories move forward as they are communicated. And when you see that happening over and over and over again, you have a pretty good understanding. Okay, they're trying to do this with this story. These are going to follow normal storytelling modes. If this is following in certain ways and this pattern is going to be repeated, this is what we can expect from this, and this. If that again lines up over and over again, we can then take another step back and understand this is how this system is going to work more often than not. We're not going to know these granular details, but we can understand how this thing is working at large. and continue backing away, whereas we've kind of been conditioned to continue moving forward into ever more granular levels of detail. I think that the approach is to go in the opposite direction. And so that's what I try to do. And for a lot of people, that's very frustrating because they want to know, like, well, what do you think specifically happened about this thing? Like, are you saying that that bullet didn't go this way through his neck and collarbone? And it's like, how the hell am I supposed to know? How the hell are you supposed to know? Why are we talking about that to begin with? Because that's not really relevant. You know, the story as it comes to us, it's happening somewhere else. And so I'm trying to focus on the level where that thing is happening, because there's a way that we can all approach this from the right distance and actually know how to orient ourselves within this situation, where getting all the details about whatever tomorrow's Twitter controversy is going to be, that doesn't tell us how to orient ourselves anywhere except maybe in an organization, or sorry, in orientation with that Twitter conversation, insofar as we understand where the social incentives are directing us. And that's about all it's useful for. And so why are we then spending our time trying to figure out the granular details of something that, knowing the granular details, isn't useful in the first place?
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, it's funny. You mentioned sort of the plot. Plot structure is something you and I have talked about a lot. And it makes me think of, you know, again, going back to that verisimilitude word, the funny thing about it is, I know I talk about it a lot, but good storytellers have an understanding that it's not, the point is not the verisimilitude, right? Like you're not, well, this depends on the filmmaker, I guess, or the writer. But I would argue that the greatest stories are not the ones with the most verisimilitude. That's not why I use that term. You know, having the most detailed story or the most detailed movie does not make your movie the best one. Verisimilitude, I think, in the hands of a great storyteller or filmmaker is something that helps people be immersed on a subconscious level. You know, like if you're doing verisimilitude right, nobody's thinking about it. They're not like, wow, that Tom Cruise stunt looks really real. Maybe at this stage in the zeitgeist, they do actually think that because it's become mimetic. But years ago, the reason Tom Cruise's stunts were becoming infamous is because they were so seamless in the context of the movie that people just kind of forgot that they're watching a movie and they're kind of being wowed by watching some, right? But the story has to be served. And I think that that's the same when you talk about a generalized approach to sort of the info war and the war of stories. It does, if you're focusing on the verisimilitude, if you're focusing in on like, what are the details of the specific story that we're being shown, you're not looking at what the whole arc is going to be. It like even reminds me of my dad, not to pick on him, but like could never my whole life get into any sort of high concept movie or anything like that. Not because he's a dumb guy, he's a really smart guy, but I noticed he would ask questions that, you know, if you're versed on watching movies and stories are not the right questions to ask, right? So you're watching, I don't know, The Lord of the Rings, and he'd be like, why, how does that guy do that with his ring or something? And it's like, that's not important, right? If you know where the story goes, you're like, that's not the thing that we should be talking about. Like, the story is not about that. The story is about something else. And I almost think that's how I think of you talking about the generalized approach to it. It's like, if you're worried about whether or not a specific plot element was correct in all its details, you might be missing why they're telling you the story and what the theme of the story is that they're trying to communicate to you.
Yeah. I mean, the specifics, this is just another thing about the epistemology and, you know, where the source of truth ultimately is. But you can know all the details of all of the conspiracy theories and still have absolutely no idea how the world operates. And it's a lot to wrap your head around, because we are taught that the way to interact with the world is by just memorizing all the facts as they've come to be understood. And again, we're conditioned into this in our education. And I think it's something that we should at least work on conditioning ourselves out of, because these are not like natural ways to understand the world. These are methods and processes that get put into our heads from outside, right? These are not, if we were in the wilderness, we would be going out and learning things, very tangible things about what sorts of things we can eat that are going to make us sick versus not getting sick. You know, it's too late in the evening to make up examples here, but we are learning by direct knowledge and direct experience, and not by trying to remember what all the plants do from a book and then going out and interacting with them.
Like you can't pet grizzly bears. You might be able to pet panda bears, that sort of thing. Right. But like some guy has to try that out.
I guess.
Somebody has to do it first, or else you would never know.
Jim Jeffries can try it.
Right. Well, that's an easy example. Like if you observe a grizzly bear killing an elk in the wild with its bare hands, you don't have to test the thesis of going to pet it yourself, which I think is
unless you want to know who stands a better chance against a grizzly bear, or an elk. Yeah,
that's true. Right. Yeah, I didn't think of that. The one more thing I wanted to ask you, I think is related to your premise there, to the article. You're talking about order of operations, right? Narrative and actual, chicken, egg, chicken. And I wonder, where do you, in terms of assigning importance, cognitive importance to thinking about things or considering things when you're observing the war of stories, how much of that, if any, do you put on the source of the stories, on the narrative intent or the storytellers themselves?
Do you mean like
or you're perceived?
Like the source, like it's CNN or the New York Times or some guy down the block kind of thing? Or
I suppose, but I less mean the accuracy. I don't mean like what's your sourcing for the claim. I more mean you're talking about a story is being told to you, right? Well, let's say it's George Floyd. A story is being told to you. How much weight at the outset of a big narrative deployment do you put on who is telling you that story? Or rather, maybe a better way to put this, even more macro, is do you consider narrative intent at the beginning of your kind of process of how you engage with a big narrative? Or do you just look at kind of the net effects of what you think the narrative is going to be?
Man, I mean, at this point, I try to back as far away as I can from all of these things, because I'm not sure that there are ways to approach them that properly account for the social effects, the effects of the mediation through the screen, and a number of these other things. So my main approach is wait and see, because I think a lot of this stuff is generated and I don't actually need to be interacting with it. And I don't think that a lot of people need to be interacting with most of it. To the extent that it is a soap opera, and maybe it's 100% a soap opera, maybe it's 80%, it's not 50%. It's going to be more than 50%. It's all dramatized. It's all scheduled. It's all coordinated messaging. And I think we can see that pretty much from all sides. The people who believe it's under full control certainly believe that it's that from at least our side, and which kind of adds in its own wrinkle. If you're going to say, well, you know that our side is manipulated and controlled, is it only our side that is manipulating and controlling these stories? Because if it's all sides, then it's hard to discern which side is which, because they're all just telling controlled stories, right? If it's only our side controlling the stories and the other things are happening naturally, well, what does that say then about the way that things are being generated from this level of the manipulation? So, man, I try to stay as far away as I can from this stuff now and try to observe it from further back. I try to take myself out of the social media environments and engage with, like I will still track mainstream media narratives and I will still track trends on social media, but I don't want to interact with the social incentives at all because I don't see that stuff anymore as me fully engaged. I see that stuff as me taking in a lot of the garbage when I am trying to get the signal, because to me at this point, all of that stuff is garbage. I don't know what the purpose of engaging with much of any of it is. And so, I try to keep approaching it from further back and see how that goes. I don't think I suffered any penalty from doing that at the end of 2023 when I quit Twitter. And I haven't detected any issue in doing that since I took bigger steps back from social media within the past few months. So I don't know if that answers the question properly.
Yeah, well, it does in an interesting way because it's like nothing was lost, right? when you let go of this, when you let go of the perceived need to track these things or like reverse engineer them all the way to their origin points, it's really not necessary, to your point, because if the effect on you or the lack thereof is the same. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess where my head is at right now with some of this stuff, when I say narrative intent, to use a really like extreme cartoonish example, there's a refrain that I feel like everyone in the info war uses of message over messenger. And I like just sort of one of the things you do is like really ruthlessly look at not just underlying premises, but sort of foundational reasoning paths that we take for granted, right? Sometimes you probably come up being like, yeah, that's a good one, a good first principle. That's one that I have begun to question, the message over messenger. I understand what the argument is of saying like, hey, don't worry about who's saying the thing, focus on the thing, and then you won't get distracted by who's saying it. And I've kind of come to believe the opposite, which is why I've asked that. The cartoonish example I was going to use is like, let's say you live in a village, a medieval village, and you know for a fact that there's one guy in the village who is a vampire, and his name is Dracula, and he's evil, right? Like that anybody who talks to him, he will attempt to eventually eat by tricking them. In that example, like the wrong info war approach in my mind is to figure out whether or not Dracula is lying to you the next time he's talking to you. The correct approach is to be like, you're Dracula and I'm not talking to you, man. Because even if you're telling me the truth, you're doing it to try to eat me. And like, that was a kind of really dumb thought, but I was like, man, maybe messenger is much more important than message. And once I've formed a value judgment on a messenger, I will stop trying to form value judgments on every message that messenger deploys. But that could get you in trouble too if you do it the opposite way. When you brought up the plan type of thing, right? You could reverse engineer that as a negative.
Yeah, the value judgments thing, I think is important. I just, from trying to discern these things over the years, you're trying to figure out, a lot of people will say, yes, I know that some of the news is fake, but not all of it can be fake, which first of all is not true. All of it absolutely can be fake. But the people who say that, they really place a lot of, again, faith in their own ability to discern these things. Like they have some special radar that tells them when things are true and when they're not true. And people think that I'm like trying to tell them, no, your radar's not good. My radar is better. And that's how I know everything is fake. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying all of our radars are totally insufficient to properly complete the task that you all are set, not everybody, but that you people speaking from this perspective are attempting to complete. You're not going to complete that task successfully enough of the time for that to be a good process. So instead, you rely on first principles, direct knowledge, and sound logic, and absolutely nothing else. And if you can't back up what you're saying or what you're thinking on that basis, then you have to be like really fluid with those beliefs. You can hold on to them, but don't hold too tight, right? All that stuff has to be the sort of thing that you can let go when new information arises, or the rest of it. You can have beliefs, whatever you need to get through the world, but the truth is that we don't have that many things we really need to decide one way or the other about. So we can keep in our minds a range of possibilities, assign them certain probabilities so that we can successfully interact with them. But ultimately, we do not have the capacity to know the truth about this entire range of issues that we don't have any actual contact with in the real world. That's just not something that we can do. So rather than trying to get it right enough of the time, which we are always going to overestimate, we just step out of that process, focus only on the things that we can know and can interact with, be very clear about what our objective standards are. And that's godly standards and not anything else. And operate forward from there as best we can, rather than pretending we know a whole bunch of things that we just don't know.
Well said, man. It's funny. I had a thought earlier, thinking of movies, of course. I was trying to think of like, why are some people so upset with your approach to things? I think less are. I think fewer are, as we said at the start of the show. But it could be that they just stopped listening to us. But I thought of Inception, and I thought of the characters of Cobb and Mal, DiCaprio, and then what's her name, Marion Cotillard. And I guess you could, how someone thinks of your approach to reality is probably indicative of which character they think you are. And I was thinking of it in the context of the way Cobb drives his wife insane in the movie and feels very guilty for is he plants one idea in her mind, and that idea is that her world is not real. And he just plants that idea in her mind, and it, we are told, sends her into this horrific spiral where she, as a figment of his, she eventually dies, she kills herself in reality prime, we are led to believe. And I think like the whole movie is that tragedy. And I think that on a subconscious level, maybe I'm giving people way too much credit, but people that become very upset with you when you're disrupting the plan, they think that you're seeding the idea into Mal that eventually results in her killing herself because she thinks nothing is real. When you could argue that he has actually freed Mal from the prison that she was in by doing that. And if you want to get real crazy, you can argue that when Mal is attempting to wake him up at the end, he is not taking his own lesson to heart, and that he is still sleeping at the end, right? There's all the theories about the end of that movie, but I don't know. The foundation of it is one idea that your world is not real, and people get really emotional when they are told that, even when it seems like their entire foundational belief and why they call themselves a truther is that on some level they have rejected reality as told to them by other people.
Yeah, I don't think that my outlook on that is depressing in the least. Like, if you believe that only God is real and that everything else is contingent on that base layer, then you try to interact with that base layer. And then no matter what the state of reality is, again, you're operating in the same way regardless. And so you're already properly aligned, and I'm not trying to claim that I am properly aligned with God, although that is what I strive for. So I try to head in that direction in whatever ways that I can, while I am conscious of doing that and trying to curtail the more base parts of my human nature. I think that it is a lot more depressing to believe that you understand the science and that you know the science is given to us by experts, and that the universe is a bleak, infinite void, and that we are little specks of dust that exist for just a blink of an eye in the grand span of the 14 billion years since the Big Bang. Like, all that shit is so stupid. And there's a reason why those stories are told, and it's because they make humans nihilists. Like, if you want to invert everything, which is the game Satan plays, and also the game that our system thrives on, then you would, at some point, go to the big picture views on things and figure out how to invert those. And then you would put together a massive program of cultural indoctrination so that everybody believes those things. And it turns out that's exactly what we have. You know, we hear about these black hat psyops meant to make people look stupid. You know what a black hat psyop is that makes people look stupid? School.
Well said. You don't have to convince me. Don't make me go on my rant about sitting still.
Yeah.
Every year. Yeah. Well said, man. It does. All roads lead back to belief in God. If they're trying to make you feel insignificant. Yeah. I don't know. And again, like
significant that way. And you're going to be aligned with whatever the truth is. And if people want to be upset about that, that's their own damn business. I don't care at all.
Yeah, I mean, again, if in the Inception example, if your world is fake, then somebody telling you that is not devolving into nihilism. To your point, it's like, hey, don't you want to know what's real? First principles, God.
Can you interact if your reality is fake? Can you interact with your reality in a godly way? The answer is still yes. And so just do that, and then you don't have to worry. So it is possible that all of it's fake, right? But what we're really talking about here is experience mediated by the screen and what we know about a world that we don't actually have any contact with whatsoever. And to attribute hard reality to those elements without having any contact with them makes absolutely no sense. That is not the same as arguing that, like, my friends and family aren't real. Okay, that's not the claim that's being posited here. And we can certainly kick those kinds of claims around for the theoretical discussion about them, and maybe we'd have an interesting discussion. But we're talking specifically here right now about things that are being projected to us by systems of power and authority through multiple levels of mediation, and then convincing us to live our lives in certain ways in correspondence with that shit. And all of that stuff can go. And the truth is, we won't miss it.
That's a great way to end it on, is again, going back to the very central premise of the premise, which is, what is the story trying to get you to do or believe, right? And Chris's advice would be to withhold the belief, and then the story can't make you do anything. All right, man.
The times that we withhold belief, where we could have placed belief in something and been on solid ground, the penalty for that is extremely low, and you can adjust anytime you need to. The penalty for believing a bunch of bullshit all the time until someone can prove to you on a materialist evidentiary basis that the thing is fake, you're going to be making mistakes absolutely all the time, and you will come to adopt the belief system that they are projecting at large, and your life is only going to be made all that much worse for it.
So Chris is claiming that if you trust the plan, you are the same thing as somebody driving around with a mask on in their car.
Well, ultimately, man,
pretty much.
Some of that plan trusting has gotten people to do some pretty dumb shit.
You ain't trusting, you ain't trying.
On par with the face masks of 2020.
All right, man. Awesome show. I think. Thank you for joining me. I know you got to get back to the fam. So we'll do this again, and you will see both of us next Tuesday night on Badlands Story Hour. We are going to be doing A Beautiful Mind, which I have not rewatched yet.
I have not.
That should
either.
Be interesting.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
All right, man. I'll see you then.
Thank you.
Peace. That is Chris Paul. Go to imyourmoderator.substack.com. Subscribe. You can subscribe for free, and his articles come out on a delay, free, but don't do that. Shoot over a donation there, subscription. I've said a million times, so Chicken Egg Chicken is his latest. He's got a million good ones out there, though. And I've said a bunch that the Substack platform has not only been great to us in terms of like to everybody that I know in this little sphere has not been censored by them, which is important. But also when you guys do support us over there, it goes like the furthest of many of these platforms, which is great. So you can kind of know that the most of your dollar is getting there. And we do appreciate the people who read our stuff too. Not everybody who does the podcast thing is a writer, which is okay. But I would argue that the writing, certainly for me, and I think definitely with Chris, people with that kind of predilection of thinking that way, it's a different mode of thinking, right? And I know a lot of people that read that stuff feel like they are engaging with it differently when you're reading thought paths like that rather than listening to them. And same with me speaking a thought path or Chris speaking it versus writing it. I don't think one's inherently better than the other, but they're different. It's a different way of engaging with those ideas. So go check that out. Certainly we'll have Chris back on. We could do this show every week. He's very geared for it, but we would probably eventually spin out into an Ouroboros of narrative oblivion. And, where would we be then? Grab your rants before we get out of here. Tom Terrific 54 sent $25 over for the cause. Thank you, Tom. Kairos, $10. Burning Bright bespeaks the brilliance of the boar bristle beard brush, which is difficult to say. Keith O'Higgins, just trust the legal science. 2 weeks to flatten the Rico curve. Just get your Dow Jones stock shots. Man, it's pretty funny. Data 12, Richard, Marcindo, Earl, Anthony, Wayne are not in the Epstein list as alleged associates. Why? I have no idea. Those are those details sort of things. D Patriot, Chris, what's your opinion on the Bannon info that's come out regarding Epstein? We didn't have time to get into that. We've talked about that a bit. I know you talked about that on the shows. We don't even know what Steve Bannon's intent was in sitting down with Epstein. And as Ash has pointed out a bunch, some of the rabbit trails Bannon was trying to get Epstein to go down in the segments of the conversation that we have seen was pretty interesting. Big picture stuff. Again, crimes against children is the sort of thing that is the most salacious, disturbing, and emotional and important. But in terms of understanding how the system works, there's some things nobody really wants to talk about that Bannon was trying to get into there that, I don't know, might be worth more people thinking of. You know, you wonder sometimes when it comes to sand bunkers and honeypots, some of the salacious narratives could even be true and still be a distraction, which was one of the part of the premise that I was laying out last week in the honeypot hoax that I wrote, of saying like it can all be true and still a psyop. So I hope this conversation helped with some of that. It's nothing we haven't talked about before, but I think we ought to, we always try to put a different spin on it. And, Chris's idea of chicken, egg, chicken, what comes first, the story or the thing about the story, the thing that informs the story? Is the actual provoked by the story? Does it inform the story retroactively? I think a lot of truthers got into this because they rejected a core narrative at some point, and yet they don't seem willing to do that even from their own side. Say like they spend so much time digging into the details of events they're told about without questioning the veracity of the story they're being told in the first place. So that seems like a little backwards. Keith O'Higgins again, I believe in patriot, vigilantly justice. We need to put in prison the hoodwinkers with a strongly worded Substack article. You're right. We do. Jeb, person A and B, you go vote. That is the real you, vote B. But the outcome is we're told that person A won. Truth is person B won, thus fake vote. So what came first, the result or the vote? You have to prove it. You're not going to convince Chris elections are real. I mean, and the way I would sum up the election system is even people getting into the machines and the Save Act and the citizens and whatever, like, are our elections more real because we are now only citizens' votes are being stolen rather than everybody's votes? It doesn't matter. Like, it's a good start, but it's like a race, right? Like, it doesn't matter how well you start the race if you don't finish the race. You can have the best start ever. If you don't finish the race, you don't finish it. In the context of elections, what is finishing the race? Having an open source, decentralized verification process that everyone watching the show can participate in. If each of us must have a way to independently and provably verify the results of our vote and of the election at large. And if that is not the case, then by definition, even if we never get there, by definition, at some point in an election process, you are outsourcing your trust to third parties delivering what they say the result of the election is to you. The idea that that is controversial to the truth community is utterly maddening to people like us. The idea that it is controversial to say you have not fixed elections unless I or you can verify directly and independently whether or not the election was real. Otherwise, you are automatically outsourcing your discernment to somebody else and your trust to somebody else. And sometimes they might be telling you the truth, and sometimes they may not be telling you the truth. And Pepe like you, go fuck yourself, you pussy. I don't really care. You can call us doomers. It's so funny because people that call us doomers for having conversations about the nature of the info war and reality are like the exact type of quote unquote truthers that have made me, in large part, look at the truth community as having way bigger problems than I ever saw when I first got into it. So, you're just kind of proving the point there. Like, trust the plan. You can't describe what the plan is. Nothing can stop it except for talking about it. All those kinds of things. There's many different ways that goes. Keith Higgins, a scientist, just proved that God is a man because he can do math. This is the perfect Reese's Peanut Butter Cup podcast. Chris gets blamed for putting his epistemology into BB's verisimilitude, and Chris blames BB's verisimilitude for getting into his epistemology. Yeah, well said, man. Kay felt, Chris, I really disliked you in the beginning. You would talk and I would just roll my eyes. I started listening to your podcast, then something clicked and I got it. Our job is to question. Now I pay the monthly premium and I just love your perspective and hope to meet you in Nashville. Thanks. That's great. I think he probably saw you in the chat. So that's awesome. We always love that kind of stuff. And somewhere along the line, you either realize Chris Paul is not a contrarian in the way you thought, or that he is in a way you needed him to be, like the Batman refrain, right? Not the hero we deserve, the one we need right now. And I don't know. It's amazing, as Chris often points out, like, it is amazing that just simply saying, hey, do we know the truth about the Epstein files in the truth community is met with immediate ridicule, like shaming, ridicule, you're not trusting the plan. And then, as John Harold has been saying lately, like, okay, well, do you know what the plan is? Do you know what the truth is? Well, yeah. Okay, tell me. Well, I can't because less than 10 know about it. And I'm a Q person. That's the irony here, which is why I will leave you with let me see if I have any boost to catch up on. If you're watching this on replay, as always, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost and leave a boost for the narrative. We do have one, actually. It was from JC Bird, longtime Badlander, very generous supporter, who sent over $50.09. BB, wordsmith extraordinaire, I appreciate you, brother. God bless you and your family. Thank you so much, JC. And JC is a subscriber on pretty much all of our Substacks as well. Very much appreciate that. And before I leave you guys, this article that I put out today, I thought was going to be extraordinarily controversial, and I mean, maybe it is. Maybe the people who hate it just have not been saying anything about it. But the response so far has been great. The title of this article was inspired, or actually supplied directly by Chris Paul. This article was inspired by a conversation in the Badlands chat, the back-end Badlands chat, between myself and Chris and some others. And one of the things the Matrix film is ubiquitous in the truth community and in the awakening, and certainly in the Q community. And I think a lot of people misunderstand aspects of the Matrix. It's almost like such a simple movie, but the concepts, I think, sometimes get inverted. For example, you guys have heard me rant and ramble about the co-opting of the term red pill as being synonymous with Republicans, when it's never been that. The red pill is a reality pill. Where you conflate the Republican Party with reality, I don't know if you're watching the same movie as me. And this all spilled out of a little bit of a frustration that I have felt. I've said a million times, the most popular article I ever wrote on the Burning Bright Substack remains there to this day, proudly pinned to the top of that profile. That is We Are Q, the past, present, and future of the Great Awakening. I wrote that over 3 years ago, in which I said the Q operation was a damn good psyop, to echo the words of General Mike Flynn, and I stand by that. I think it was a good psyop. But the cult of Morpheus, on the misappropriation of the Q drops and the hijacking of the Great Awakening, this basically lays out the premise that the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar is what most of the truth community is. They trust Morpheus. Morpheus, in this analogy, is Q. Morpheus presented the choice, right? The choice to know. Here is the red pill. Here is the blue pill. Now, everybody who calls themselves an Anon took the red pill. You wanted to see the real world. So Morpheus showed it to you. But I feel most of the truth community has become the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar. Trinity, Mouse, Dozer, Tank, Switch, APOC. That's crazy that I remember even the shitty ones. Cypher, the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar. They are awakened, but they are not the one. They are not sovereign. Why are they not the one? Because ultimately, Morpheus shows them the door to walk through to reality prime. And they walk through that door, and then what do? They outsource every bit of discernment in the future to Morpheus. Why do you think Morpheus keeps looking for the one? Because he knows that nobody in the crew is the one. And he knows he is not the one because he is looking for the one. The act of searching for Neo invalidates and disqualifies Morpheus as the one. It disqualifies him as a sovereign, just like the crew's trust in Morpheus disqualifies them as sovereigns, because ultimately they have not woken up fully. They understand that reality is false. They understand the Matrix is false, but they believe that the path to awakening comes through Morpheus and through Q. How does Neo break beyond that? What is the awakening moment for Neo? What is the moment when Morpheus knows he is the one? It's not the ending that everybody thinks about. It's not him fighting Agent Smith. It is when Neo disobeys Morpheus' plan in order to save Morpheus. That is when Neo self-actualizes, disobeys the plan, breaks the plan, and exercises his own sovereignty. That is what Morpheus was trying to find, and ultimately, in betraying Morpheus, Neo literally frees him. So, it's actually a brilliant movie and a brilliant story, and it's one that almost everybody on your Twitter profile or True Social profile or anybody you've ever encountered in the info war quotes from ad nauseum, and they don't fucking understand it. They don't understand it. They all think they're running around as Neo when they shame the shit out of everybody who questions not that there is a plan, but that Cypher or Mouse or Trinity or even Morpheus is the arbiter and the authority on it. You're the authority on it. You are. That's what I think the point is. If Donald Trump was returning power back to you, the people, you have to take it. You have to take it back. You have to self-actualize. You have to think for yourself, which is what the Q drops directly call for you to do. And instead, the Q community, not all of them, of course, there's a Q show starting right now, 2 guys I really like at Badlands who do not do this. But you guys know, most of the Q community at this stage has become a loop of trusting a plan and demonizing anybody who dares to try to self-actualize and push into the future. So, next time you're engaging with a truther or a Q account or whatever it is, or a MAGA person, ask yourself, am I looking at a Morpheus, a Cypher, a Trinity, an Agent, or a Neo? And anyway, burningbright.substack.com, The Cult of Morpheus. Check it out. It's laid out in much greater detail there. And hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, give me a follow over there. If you don't, just whatever. That's fine. All right, guys. Next week, I think, not 100% confirmed, but I think I am going to be joined by a very wise crew member of the Nebuchadnezzar, Zach Payne. Not 100% sure, but I just put extra pressure on him to make sure he fucking comes next week. So that is the plan. If we have to deviate, we will. I will see you guys then. Hope you enjoyed Chris Paul. Hope you subscribe to him. Hope you are all attempting to become Neos out there and not little pussy-ass bitch ciphers eating your steak in a fake restaurant across the table from an agent who's telling you to rejoin the Matrix and trust the plan. With all that said, as I always say, the war is a story, the story is a war, act accordingly. See you guys next week.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing.
Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You will bring me. Captain Armor. I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now